In a grand mansion under the starry night sky, Stella Ambrose finds her heart thumping in her chest as she lies in bed. A man's voice calls out to her, and she sees him looming over her. It is Callian, the heir to the throne. He smirks, asking if she was desperately looking for him. Flustered, Stella denies it, explaining that she just thought of an addition to their marriage contract. Confused, Callian reminds her they already reviewed the terms, which guarantee she will be well compensated. But Stella points out that their agreement makes no mention of a potential heir. Timidly, she asks what would happen if she were to conceive his child. Intrigued, Callian leans in closer. He asks if she's proposing that he might get her pregnant during their 3-year contract. With a determined look, Stella quietly confirms that this is exactly her intention. Stella calmly states that since they're married, the possibility of a child is very real, so the contract should be updated. Callian lets out a disbelieving scoff. He mocks her for dropping the innocent act so quickly, sneering that he should have expected this kind of transactional thinking from a woman with her background. Her face flushes with shame, but before she can protest, he cuts her off. "Fine," he says, grabbing her wrist with a surprising firmness. He agrees to add the clause to their contract. But just as relief washes over her, he leans her back against the bed, his intentions suddenly clear. The air shifts as he closes the distance between them, leaving her completely breathless. Pulling away just enough to speak, Callian looks down at her with an intense gaze. He tells her they'll add the new terms to their agreement, but only after they confirm something. With a smirk, he suggests they first need to find out if they can even conceive a child together. Stella returns home and is immediately greeted by a warm hug from her younger sister, Mary. The little girl proudly reports that she watched the house well while their father rested after a long meeting. This raises Stella's suspicions, since her father doesn't have business partners to meet with anymore. Their noble family, House Ambrose, once built its fortune selling rare mountain rock salt. But when new trade routes brought in cheaper sea salt, their wealth vanished, and their associates quickly abandoned them. Pushing the thought aside, Stella begins preparing dinner, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. She sends Mary to fetch a cabbage, but the lie about her father's meeting continues to bother her. As she quietly chops vegetables, exhausted from her own secret work, she wonders what her father is truly up to. Just then, the door flies open. A young man named Sanderson bursts in, frantically calling her name and leaving her completely stunned. As Stella stands in the quiet kitchen, one of her younger brothers rushes in, waving a newspaper. He announces shocking news from the headlines. The imperial family's summer villa has burned down, and the 2 princes staying there have passed away. Stella's shock quickly turns to practical dread. A royal tragedy of this scale means a national period of mourning will be declared. All the stores will close, cutting off her ability to find work or buy food. Her sister Mary drives the point home, appearing at her side with their family's very last cabbage. To make matters worse, her brother admits he spent their last coins on a doctor for their mother's worsening cough. Seeing her despair, he tries to share what he thinks is good news, excitedly announcing that Duke Callian Rochester is coming to the capital. Stella flinches at the name, but her brother obliviously calls the Duke her first crush. Elsewhere, the Duke himself reads the news of the prince's demise, his expression unreadable. In a private carriage, Callian's companion expresses disbelief that the news of the prince's deaths is already in the paper. He asks if Callian is alright, reminding him that the deceased were his own cousins. Callian's eye twitches with irritation. He coldly dismisses the topic as tiring and crumples the newspaper in his hands. His friend warns that he'll face the same questions in the capital, then pivots to a more interesting rumor about the now famous Stella Ambrose. The name triggers a distant memory for Callian, a small, innocent girl from his youth. But his companion quickly shatters the nostalgic image. He explains that this little girl has reportedly grown into the most scandalous woman in high society. As Callian looks out the window, his friend reveals the heart of the rumor. Stella is being considered as one of his potential marriage candidates. Callian's face hardens. Turning away from the window, he scoffs at the very idea, wondering why he would ever marry a woman with such a tainted reputation. Inside the Grand Palace, Emperor Dirklin Rhetoric wastes no time getting to the point. He bluntly informs his nephew, Callian, that he is to be married. With the 2 princes gone, Callian is now second in line for the throne, and Dirklin frames the marriage as a natural next step. Callian immediately senses the manipulation, noting that his uncle speaks as if the bride has already been chosen. And he's right, Dirklin smirks, confirming he personally selected a woman he claims Callian will be very pleased with. Gritting his teeth, Callian knows exactly who his uncle has chosen, Stella Ambrose, a woman with a scandalous reputation. He fumes internally, wishing Dirklin would just admit this is about controlling the line of succession. Tired of the charade, Callian stands to leave, citing other business. As he walks away, his uncle adds a final, twisted remark. He mentions that he's heard this young lady has been in love with Callian for a very long time, telling him to be kind. Callian pauses, his back to the emperor, before leaving him to his tea. Stella hurries toward the door with a basket of flowers, determined to make some money during the national mourning period. But her father stops her, asking what she's doing. When she explains her plan to sell flowers for the funeral, he is appalled by the idea of a noble lady working on the street. Frustrated by his obsession with appearances, Stella retorts that their noble title doesn't put food on the table. She tells him he should be grateful, because her other options involve finding work in the city's back alleys. Horrified, her father accuses her of considering a life in the shadows, declaring he would rather see her beg. Unfazed, Stella cuts through his pride with a simple, devastating truth. They ate their last piece of food yesterday. A sudden cough from her sick sister Mary's room hangs in the air. Overcome with guilt, her father apologizes for his failures. Stella reassures him, promises to be back soon, and steps out into the city to provide for her family. As Stella steps outside, a wave of guilt washes over her. She chides herself for snapping at her father, knowing he had every right to be upset about their family's desperate situation. Pushing the feeling aside, she decides she will apologize properly once she returns and heads into the city, determined to provide. By the time night falls, her basket is empty. The day was a success. And while the profit isn't much after paying her supplier, it's enough. Her family won't have to go hungry. On her way home, she spots a single flower on the cobblestone zone she must have dropped earlier. Picking it up, her mind drifts back to a simpler time. A memory surfaces of a friend excitedly telling her that her first crush, Duke Rochester, was coming to the capital. A small smile touches her lips. She decides to use the flower to pay her respects at the funeral. If she's lucky, she might even catch a glimpse of the Duke from afar. Stella arrives home to a house that is eerily quiet. She calls out, but her little sister, Mary, doesn't come running like she always does. A knot of worry forms in her stomach as she quietly makes her way upstairs. Peeking into Mary's room, she finds the small girl lying listlessly in bed. Stella rushes to her side, and the moment her hand touches Mary's forehead, her fears are confirmed. The girl is burning with a high fever. Panicked, Stella declares she's going to call a doctor, but Mary's weak hand grabs her wrist, stopping her. When Stella asks why, Mary delivers a heartbreaking truth. They don't have any money. The words crush Stella. Pushing down her own despair, she quickly invents a lie, claiming the kind flower seller let her keep all the day's earnings. Relieved, Mary asks if Stella can stay with her tomorrow. Stella gently refuses, explaining she must repay the man's kindness. She promises to bring back a tasty treat, her resolve hardening once more. After tending to Mary, Stella slips out of the room, her mind consumed by a single thought. She needs money for medicine. The question is, how? Clenching her dress in quiet desperation, she feels completely trapped by her circumstances. Just then, she spots a familiar face, Sanderson, looking at a job posting. A sudden wave of resolve washes over her. Tired of her wretched life, she rushes toward him. She quickly asks Sanderson to look after her sister, Mary, who is very sick. Stunned, he asks where she's going at this hour. With a determined smile, Stella tells him she's not running away. She's going to do what she does best and make money. Sanderson calls after her, wondering where she could possibly find work in the middle of the night. But his words are lost as she runs purposefully into the darkness, not looking back. Stella raced through the city's dark back alleys, her breath catching in her throat. She found herself in a district known for its rowdy nightlife, an area she never could have imagined visiting. The steamy air and loud patrons were a world away from her own. Her earlier determination began to waver, and for a moment, all she wanted was to go home. But then, the image of her sick sister, Mary, flashed in her mind. The girl's weak plea echoed in her memory. They had no money. That single thought was enough to reignite her resolve. She refused to believe that the only work available was selling her dignity in the city's shadows. There had to be menial chores, anything, if she just looked hard enough. Just as she was about to press on, a familiar voice called out her name. Stella froze, her heart dropping as a woman turned around. It was Lily, her loyal former maid. A deep sense of shame washed over her. Of all the people to see her here, it had to be Lily. Stella wished the ground would swallow her whole. Stella returned home, hoping to slip in unnoticed, but Sanderson was still awake and waiting. The moment he saw her, relief washed over him and he rushed to pull her into a tight hug. He confessed how worried he was when she ran out so late at night. Stella gently patted his back, apologizing for scaring him. She explained that while she was out, she ran into her old maid, Lily, who had found a job for her. Sanderson's expression immediately soured. He asked if she was going to become a maid, his hand clenching into a tight fist at the thought of her taking such a position. Stella quickly shook her head, clarifying that she could work as a footman instead. She took his hand, telling him he was still just a child and that work was for adults. She promised to figure everything out. But her reassurance only made him feel more helpless, frustrated that he was too young to protect her from the dangers of the night. Sanderson's frustration turned to tears, as he wished he could just be an adult already. Seeing him so upset, Stella gently asked why he was crying. He threw his arms around her, promising to grow up fast so he could work and she wouldn't have to. With a comforting smile, Stella told him he couldn't grow up if he didn't get enough sleep. He finally agreed, and went to bed after letting her know he had taken care of Mary. The next morning, Stella felt a sense of relief. She was glad Lily had found her a job, but she hadn't told Sanderson the whole story. The position was at a social club, and she knew that information would only worry him more, but she told herself it would be fine since her work was confined to the kitchen. Before it was time to leave for her shift, she carefully plucked a single flower from a vase. She decided she had just enough time to visit the memorial and pay her respects to the late princes. Before her shift, Stella visited the memorial for the late princes. She peeked around a stone pillar, assuming she was alone since it was still early. She approached the grand tomb and gently placed a single, carefully chosen flower upon it. As she paused for a moment of quiet respect, a sharp scoff cut through the air. Startled, she looked up and saw a man holding a massive bouquet. Stella's heart skipped a beat when she recognized him. It was her fiancé, Duke Rochester. He looked annoyed to see her there. He casually tossed his extravagant flowers onto the tomb, their abundance making her small offering look pathetic. He gave her one last, contemptuous glance before turning to leave. Stella was left reeling from the encounter. She quickly sniffed her clothes, wondering if she smelled bad, but concluded she didn't. She was utterly baffled as to why he had looked at her as if she were some kind of vermin. As his carriage rattled down the road, Prince Callian was reviewing official papers. His aide brought up a troubling rumor spreading that Callian's marriage to Stella had been confirmed. The prince seemed unfazed, stating he was used to being the subject of wild stories. However, he admitted this one felt particularly scandalous. His hand tightened around the document he was holding as he asked for the full story. The aide then explained the truly ugly part of the tale. The rumor claimed that even the formidable Duke Rochester, a hardened man who had survived years in the military, would be powerless to resist Stella. It painted a vivid picture, suggesting that if she were to make a bold, personal advance, not even the stoic Duke would be able to refuse her. This was a vicious lie, clearly designed to tarnish Stella's name beyond repair. Duke Rochester stepped into a lavish social club, the sound of quiet chatter filling the air. He had a bad feeling about the place from the moment he heard its location. Though it claimed to be a social club, to him it felt no better than a back alley bar. As he entered the private room, a man named Egbert greeted him loudly. "There he is, the star of the night," Egbert declared, puffing on a cigar, announcing that Duke Rochester had finally graced their dump with his presence. Rochester looked around with disdain, thinking he never would have come if he'd known what kind of place this was. Egbert explained that most establishments were closed for the official mourning period, limiting their options. He urged the Duke to sit down for a chat. Once they were seated, Egbert got right to the point, asking why Rochester had suddenly joined the military. The Duke simply stated that too many things troubled him back then. Egbert smirked, recalling Rochester's habit of saying he can't be bothered. He then pointed out that for someone who avoided trouble, the Duke was now in a very difficult situation. Egbert clarified that the Duke's difficult situation was his fiancée, Lady Stella Ambrose. At the sound of her name, Rochester's eye twitched with irritation. Egbert continued to mock her, sarcastically calling Stella the daughter of the year. He claimed that to save her family, she was spending her nights on the streets in daring dresses, hoping to attract a wealthy man. Despite this, he called her a snob for rejecting suitors she couldn't afford to be picky about. He noted that every man who fell for her seemed absolutely mesmerized by her looks. Curious, Egbert asked if Rochester had ever seen her in person. The Duke let out a breath of smoke, admitting that he had. His verdict was blunt. She was irritatingly pretty. As his hand clenched the arm of his chair, a man's boastful voice carried from another room. It was one of Stella's relatives bragging that Rochester was already captivated. He was certain that once his niece decided to charm the Duke, the man wouldn't stand a chance. Meanwhile, the subject of the Emperor's scheme, Prince Callian, let out a puff of smoke. He was completely annoyed, wondering why he was suddenly being saddled with a wife and her family's baggage. He cursed the Ambrose name under his breath. Elsewhere, Stella was trying to earn a living, scrubbing away in a kitchen under the fake name Laura. She couldn't stop thinking about Duke Rochester and the contempt she saw in his eyes. Her manager suddenly snapped her out of her thoughts. He explained they were short-staffed because of the mourning period and needed her to help serve drinks in the lounge. Stella hesitated. explaining she thought she would only be working in the kitchen. The manager was not pleased. He reminded her that her friend Lily had recommended her, and she needed to work hard to avoid making Lily look bad. Feeling the weight of her friend's kindness, Stella knew she couldn't refuse. Not wanting to let her friend down, Stella reluctantly agreed to serve the guests. Carrying a tray of drinks, she walked into the lounge, praying that her simple uniform would be enough of a disguise. As she moved through the room, a familiar voice cut through the noise, calling out her full name. Stella froze, her blood running cold. She recognized that voice. It belonged to Duke Rochester. At that very moment, she overheard a group of noblemen nearby. One man asked another how he'd like that famous girl for a wife. The others laughed, making crude remarks about her appearance and reputation. They even joked that she could be sold for a fortune. Stella's face burned with humiliation. She had left high society, yet they were still gossiping about her. Then, one of the men turned to Prince Callian and bluntly asked if he also wanted a chance with the notorious woman. Prince Callian looked on with a cold expression, silently judging Stella Ambrose. He decided a woman like her wasn't worthy to stand beside him, and the other nobles were quick to agree, laughing at her expense. Hearing their cruel jokes, Stella's hands began to shake. Overwhelmed by shame, she turned to flee the lounge but immediately collided with a guest. Her tray went flying, and the bottle and plates shattered across the marble floor. She collapsed into the mess, landing hard as someone angrily told her to watch where she was going. Pushing herself up, Stella's hand pressed down on a sharp piece of glass. She flinched in pain while the other guests began to whisper about the clumsy servant. The humiliation was crushing. A gentle voice suddenly asked if she was all right, but the kindness only made her feel worse. Looking up, she saw Prince Callian standing over her. He calmly noted that she looked hurt, and all Stella wanted to do was run away. Prince Callian looked down at the disgraced servant and calmly noted that she looked hurt. Mortified, Stella could only stammer that she was okay, wishing the ground would swallow her whole. At that moment, one of the nobles who had been mocking her approached Callian, smugly asking if she was responsible for the mess. Callian simply replied, no. He then said he felt pity for her and wanted to help, but his version of help was the ultimate humiliation. He produced a handful of gold coins and casually tossed them onto the floor, the metal clinking around her. He declared the money would cover the spilled drinks and her medical costs. As blood dripped from her cut hand onto the coins, Stella forced herself to gather them, desperately insisting this wasn't humiliating. The other noble then asked Callian to resume their important discussion. With one last cold glance, the prince turned his back and walked away, leaving Stella utterly broken on the floor. As Stella gathered the gold coins, blood mixing with the metal, her mind raced. The public shame was crushing, but the money was a miracle. With this, she could finally afford a doctor for her sick sister, Mary. She trembled, telling herself the humiliation was a small price to pay for her family's survival. This was the only way. Suddenly, Sanderson, the man who'd hired her, ran over in shock, calling her by her alias, Laura. He stared in disbelief at the wealth scattered on the floor around her. Across the room, Prince Callian watched the scene unfold with cold detachment. He believed her name was as cheap as she was, and he assumed its whole display was a pathetic attempt to gain his favor, just as his uncle had warned. But as he observed her genuine despair, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. If this was all just a calculated act, then she had no right to look so utterly broken. He was left questioning what he had just witnessed. Meanwhile, Duke Rochester was forced to entertain tiresome gossip. Other nobles buzzed with rumors that he was investing in a newly discovered sea route. Playing his part, Rochester feigned interest, confirming he was considering the project. Privately, he was disgusted. The route was supposed to be a secret, and he was surrounded by fools who actually believed his public performance. Later that night, Stella returned to her humble home, her hand now bandaged. She whispered that she was home, but the relief was short-lived. The reality of the evening came crashing down, and she began to sob, clutching the gold coins Callian had thrown at her. She had lost a precious job and suffered immense shame. The urge to just run away and escape the embarrassment was overwhelming. But a single thought stopped her. What would happen to her younger siblings if she was gone? At that moment, her sick sister Mary appeared. Stella immediately pulled her into a desperate hug, holding on to the very reason she endured it all. Completely drained, Stella winced from her injuries and decided to push the humiliation out of her mind for the night. She had to leave early tomorrow to find a new job anyway. Just then, she noticed a paper left on the table job posting for a live-in governess. A spark of hope ignited within her. The position offered housing and meals, which was a huge relief. She figured her noble background might even be an asset, and leaving the capital could finally put a stop to the vicious gossip about her. Filled with this new purpose, she went to her father's room. She stopped short, overhearing him muttering about the absurd rumors questioning her virtue. When she presented her plan, he was appalled. He couldn't stomach the thought of an unmarried daughter living elsewhere, fearing what others might say. Stella begged him to be realistic, reminding him they were broke and needed medicine. But her father clenched his fist, insisting he couldn't just stand by and watch her perform such strenuous work. After their argument, Stella's father sits at the table, completely lost. He clenches his fists, wondering what he can do to fix their situation. Then, a dark idea hits him. He declares that there is a way out and gets to his feet, promising himself he'll find a solution. Meanwhile, across town, an unnamed investor is having a much better day. He scoffs at the news of an upcoming visit, commenting that Stella is in no position to reject a man like Duke Rochester anyway. He sees her as a naive girl whose value is dropping by the minute, all thanks to her father. The investor smirks, looking over a complex contract. He knows Stella's father has no idea what he's about to sign. This isn't just a simple business deal, it's practically a bill of sale for his own daughter, and the arrangement will soon be sealed. After her argument with her father, Stella returned to her duties, gently wiping her sick sister Mary's forehead. The girl was weak, groaning from the fever. A soft knock broke the quiet, and her younger brother poked his head in to announce their dad was home. Stella's eye twitched with irritation. Her father had disappeared for days after declaring he'd find a solution, leaving her to worry while Mary was bedridden. She went downstairs to confront him and stopped short. He was sitting at the table with a guest, a man she knew as Uncle Vigil. The man greeted her warmly, explaining that her father had told him everything. He mentioned her plan to become a governess, noting her father's concern about it. Then, with a sly smile, Vigil held up a document. He presented it as a contract that would solve all their problems, a simple fix to their desperate situation. Confused, Stella took the contract from Vigil and demanded to know what he was talking about. Her hands trembled as she read the terms. It was a list of their every dream: a mansion in the capital, paid education fees, a live-in doctor for Mary, and a monthly pension. It was too good to be true. She looked at her father, her voice tight, asking for an explanation. He stammered that this was the only way to protect her. Rage flared in Stella's eyes. How was this protection? Her gaze fell back to the fine print, and her blood ran cold. There, listed under a single, damning heading, was her own name: Collateral. Vigil tried to explain the situation. He recapped how the person responsible for the prince's deaths had their assets seized, including their family's old salt mountain. Now, he explained with a grin, it was up for auction at a dirt cheap price. But Stella wasn't celebrating. The deal made no sense. She asked why they would buy a salt mountain when everyone had access to sea salt. The absurdity of it all hit her at once. Stella's voice trembled with rage as she asked if they were truly willing to use her as collateral for some shady deal. With a condescending smile, Vigil told her she was completely mistaken, patting her father's back reassuringly. He insisted her father would never do anything to harm her. Then, he dropped the bombshell. This wasn't about a salt mountain at all. This was her chance to become the Duchess of House Rochester. The revelation sent Stella reeling. Her mind flashed to a grand wedding, but the fantasy soured as the Duke declared she wasn't worthy to stand by his side. Snapping back to reality, she stammered that a man like him would have to be crazy to marry her. Vigil snatched the contract from her hands, his grin unwavering. He informed her that the Duke had no choice in the matter. This wasn't a request, it was an imperial decree. Elsewhere, Duke Rochester looked out a window, his expression grim. He knew he was trapped. In his office, Callian scanned the document with a smirk. An imperial decree. He coolly questioned just how badly his uncle, the Emperor, wanted him to marry Stella Ambrose. He knew that Old Snake wasn't just trying to annoy him. This was a calculated move to humiliate him and plant a spy in his house. Callian tapped his fingers on the desk, thinking through his options. Even if he successfully refused this engagement, the Emperor would just send another, potentially worse, candidate his way. He sighed, coming to a pragmatic conclusion. Marrying this unknown woman might just be the best way to save himself future trouble. Meanwhile, at a new, lavish residence, Stella received a report from a doctor. He explained that her sister Mary was suffering from a simple cold and malnutrition, but would recover with regular meals. The words hit Stella hard. She clenched her fist, consumed by guilt over problems that could have been so easily prevented. Just then, her younger brother ran in, happily showing off a new shirt he said Uncle Vigil had bought for him. Stella's brother giggled as she complimented his dashing new shirt. He cheekily suggested that if she thought he was so handsome, maybe she should marry him instead. After their sweet moment, he remembered his message. Uncle Vigil was waiting for her on the first floor. Agreeing to go down, Stella was met by her beaming father at the bottom of the staircase. He excitedly told her to hurry and see their guest. Confused, Stella asked who it was, but her father simply chuckled. He explained that it was only natural for a man to want to check on his fiancée after she moved into a new home. The thought made her nervous. It had only been a week, but their lives had drastically improved, giving her a fragile sense of hope. She had heard the Duke was receptive to the marriage. A fancy carriage pulled to a stop outside, and she dared to believe that maybe he didn't believe the rumors and genuinely wanted to see her. As Stella entered the grand drawing room, her father gestured excitedly toward an unbelievable sight. The entire space was filled with mountains of elegantly wrapped gift boxes. He beamed, proudly telling her that every single one was a gift from Duke Rochester. Stella felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. The sheer extravagance of it all was overwhelming. Her father, however, didn't miss a beat. He nudged her forward, insisting she open them right away so as not to disappoint her generous fiancé. She cautiously opened the first box and gasped. Inside lay a stunning green dress. Just then, an attendant appeared with even more. He presented a massive, beautiful basket of flowers, explaining it was also from the Duke, and came with a card. Stella's heart began to pound as she read the simple note inside. It confirmed what she'd been told but hadn't dared believe. With this grand gesture, maybe her hope for a stable future wasn't just a dream after all. Clutching the Duke's card, Stella's heart hammered in her chest. For the first time, she let herself feel a flicker of real hope, wondering if it was okay to actually look forward to this marriage. Her thoughts were interrupted when an attendant clarified the Duke's intentions. He hadn't wanted to surprise her, so he sent the presents first and would arrive soon after. The realization hit Stella like a lightning bolt. He was on his way right now. Happiness warred with a sudden panic. She was thrilled that he was coming. But what if he met her and was disappointed? Looking at the mountain of gifts, she decided she had to make herself presentable. It was only polite to greet him in the beautiful green dress he had just given her. A short while later, she emerged onto the terrace, completely transformed. Her uncle, Vigil, looked on proudly, telling her the dress was perfect and that he only wished her father was there to see it. Stella smiled, explaining he had to go get medicine for her mother. As Stella smoothed out her new green dress, she quietly hoped the Duke would like it. Her uncle Vigil offered a warm smile, reassuring her that any man with eyes could see her quality. Just then, he glanced toward the gate and spotted a figure standing there. Convinced it was the Duke, he urged Stella to go welcome her fiancé. Stella's heart fluttered as she started walking, but her excitement was tainted by a bitter memory. She recalled the day Duke Rochester had thrown gold coins at her feet in disgust. He had laughed with his friends, calling her a disgrace to high society and someone utterly unworthy of him. She pushed the memory aside, telling herself he was a wise man. He must have investigated the rumors and realized they were false. Approaching the visitor, she realized he hadn't come in a coach. A sudden chill went through her when the man turned at it wasn't the Duke. The stranger's face was hidden by a hat, and he asked if she was Stella Ambrose. Confused, she asked if she knew him. He leaned in close, his voice dripping with malice as he told her she knew exactly who he was. Then he lunged forward and snatched her wrist. The stranger's grip was like iron as he accused her of gladly accepting his jewelry and clothes. He sneered, reminding her that he had even broken off his own engagement for her sake. Stella's mind raced. This man was completely unhinged. She looked around frantically, wondering why her uncle wasn't stepping in to help. He shook her violently, demanding to know why she'd cut off contact. He asked if he hadn't given her enough money, or if she'd simply found someone new. Trembling, Stella insisted he had mistaken her for someone else. Her denial only fueled his fury, questioning if their love had been a mistake. He raised his hand to strike her. But before the blow could land, a firm hand shot out and caught his wrist mid-swing. A calm, steady voice cut through the tension, asking what was going on. The attacker spun around, scoffing at the well-dressed newcomer. He sneered, assuming this must be Stella's new man, and offered some unsolicited advice, calling her a deceitful woman who pretended to be innocent. The well-dressed newcomer coolly thanked the attacker for his useless advice before grabbing him by the collar. He informed the man it was a shame he'd opened his mouth, because he didn't like getting tips from others. Just as the attacker stammered about a possible mistake, Stella's uncle arrived, finally recognizing the real Duke Rochester. The uncle quickly tried to clean up the mess, dismissing the attacker as some random bum and insisting it was all a misunderstanding. He offered to take care of the man and told the Duke to check on Stella, who was clearly distressed. Ignoring him, Duke Rochester repeated the word misunderstanding with a cold, dismissive tone. He strode over to Stella, who had collapsed to the ground, trying to catch her breath. Looming over her, he stated that he'd come to speak with her. With a chilling glare, he added that she had just provided her fiancé with a very interesting and unexpected scene. Duke Rochester looked down, his expression hardening. He remarked coolly that the situation was even worse than he had imagined. Panicked, Stella stumbled forward, desperately trying to explain herself. She insisted it was all a complete misunderstanding, swearing she'd never seen the attacker before in her life. With tears in her eyes, she pleaded her innocence. The Duke, however, was completely unmoved. His voice remained flat and cold as he told her he'd heard stories that her beauty had a powerful effect on men. He then gave a chilling command. She was to cut ties with all of them before their wedding. As a final, dismissive gesture, he added that if she needed money to settle things, she could speak to his aid. Turning his back, he walked away. Stella was left crushed, realizing her dream of a happy marriage was impossible. She wasn't escaping her prison. She was simply being transferred to a different hell. At the lavish wedding hall, Stella's father directed a young boy, Sanderson, to the bride's room, warning him not to stay long. As Sanderson scurried off, the father watched him, his mind heavy with the absurd rumors surrounding the marriage. His thoughts were soon confirmed by the sharp whispers of two women nearby. They snickered to each other, mocking Stella for not having a dowry yet demanding such an extravagant ceremony. One woman venomously suggested Stella must have used questionable means to climb so high. Hearing this, Stella's father scratched his head in frustration. He desperately wanted to shut them down, but knew he couldn't make a scene on his daughter's wedding day. He could only hope the children were out of earshot. Meanwhile, Sanderson entered Stella's room. Seeing her in the stunning wedding gown, he asked a simple question. Was she happy? He explained he'd overheard guests saying she was too good for the groom and was the most beautiful woman in the world. Caught off guard by his innocent sincerity, Stella felt a warm blush creep across her face. Sanderson fidgeted, relaying what the guests were saying that the groom didn't deserve her at all. Overcome with emotion, the young boy suddenly clasped Stella's hands. With tears in his eyes, he begged her to leave everything and just run away. He hated seeing her so miserable and promised he would take care of the aftermath, admitting they had all made her life difficult. But Stella simply offered a gentle smile. She softly reassured him that she was fine and that he shouldn't worry about her. Moments later, a booming voice announced the bride's entrance. As her father walked her down the aisle, Stella knew the truth. The worst wedding imaginable, one that nobody actually wanted, was now beginning. She reached Duke Rochester at the altar. The moment her hand touched his, the cold, harsh reality of her situation finally crashed down on her. This wasn't a new beginning. It was just the finalization of a deal. At the altar, the officiant prompts the groom, Callian Rochester, and the bride, Stella Ambrose, to declare their intent. As they stand together, Stella leans her head against Callian's shoulder, quietly sniffling while he lets out a weary sigh. The officiant asks Callian if he vows to be a good husband, and he calmly replies that he does. When the same question is posed to Stella, asking if she will be a faithful and dutiful wife, she visibly tenses. After a brief pause, she steels her nerves and gives her consent. To seal their vows, Callian lifts her veil. He gently tilts her chin and gives her a kiss as the guests begin to applaud. However, amidst the celebration, sharp whispers cut through the air. The crowd's attention shifts to Madame Rochester, the groom's mother, whose face is a mask of cold disapproval. One guest murmurs that her displeasure is understandable. After all, she wouldn't want a woman like Stella for a daughter-in-law either. As the applause faded, Callian gently touched Stella's lips, whispering for her to stop looking so sad. He then stated coldly that he didn't have the patience to console her when she cried. Understanding the command, Stella simply nodded and forced a smile for the crowd. As they walked away from the altar, arm in arm, Callian scoffed to himself, silently cursing the Ambrose family name. Later that evening, the celebration was finally over. Alone in a lavish room, Stella sank into a chair, completely drained. She admitted to herself that she never realized a wedding could be so exhausting. All she wanted was to go to sleep, but she knew that wasn't an option. Suddenly, the doors to the room opened. Stella looked up in alarm as Callian entered, dressed only in a loose robe. He stopped in the doorway, a determined look on his face. He reminded her that technically their wedding night was not yet over. As Callian entered their room, he told Stella to sit and make herself comfortable. But she couldn't relax. Her mind was racing. She remembered what happened right after the wedding ceremony ended. The Duke's aide had approached her and silently presented her with a document. It was a marriage contract, laying out a very specific arrangement. The marriage would last a maximum of 3 years, after which they would divorce. Her only role was to be a quiet and ladylike duchess. In exchange for her silence, the terms were shockingly generous. A large allowance during the marriage, and upon their divorce, she would receive land, a manor, and a hefty monthly income for life. She recalled how biased the contract was, benefiting her completely. Back in the present, Stella nervously told Callian they needed to talk. She looked at him and confirmed she had received the contract earlier. Callian's expression shifted, and he leaned in close to ask Stella what her real goal was. Before she could process the question, he grabbed her, accusing her of trying to lure him in with an innocent look. Stella flinched, completely denying his strange accusation. He then cornered her, asking if she had gotten her hopes up because it was their wedding night. Panicked, she swore that wasn't it, but he gave her no room to escape. A light push sent her tumbling backward onto the bed. Her heart pounded in her chest as he loomed over her. She quickly explained that she just wanted to add something to their contract. Callian pointed out its biggest flaw. The document said nothing about an heir. As he grew bolder, Stella pleaded for him to wait. He agreed to add the clause, but stated he had one condition. First, he said coolly, they needed to find out if having a child together was even possible. Stella could only stare, completely stunned. Looming over her, Callian coolly asked if this wasn't the kind of wedding night she expected. Flustered, Stella clutched her robe, reminding him that they still hadn't revised their contract. But Callian dismissed her attempt to delay. He warned her that if she planned to use the contract as an excuse to run away, she never should have provoked him. Before she could process his words, he leaned in and closed the distance between them. The sudden intimacy left Stella breathless and completely overwhelmed. He was persistent, asserting his control over the situation until she was left gasping. Pulling back, Callian observed her shaken state. He commented that if a simple moment like that frightened her, she was clearly not ready for a child. He then effortlessly lifted her from her feet. Panicked, Stella asked him to put her down, her heart pounding. Instead, he carried her back to the bed, making it obvious that tonight, he was the one in charge. Just as quickly as he had taken control, Callian pulled away. He calmly informed Stella that he would have his aide revise their contract, instructing her to simply read it over and sign it. With a brisk good night, he turned and left the room without a second glance. The door clicked shut, leaving Stella utterly alone and bewildered. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she sat on the edge of the bed, the reality of her situation sinking in. This was a far cry from the quiet life she once thought she'd have. Meanwhile, Callian had already fled to the palace. He was met by Crown Prince Rodney Rhetoric, who found it strange that a groom would be out so late on his wedding night. Callian dropped into a chair, explaining that he couldn't stand to be in the same house as his devious bride. He bitterly recounted her look of wide-eyed innocence, calling her a vixen. Hearing this, the Crown Prince was left with a startling thought. Could Stella Ambrose secretly be another man's lover? Crown Prince Rodney voices a serious suspicion. Could Stella be the Emperor's spy? The idea clicks for Callian. While he has no proof, it's the only explanation that makes sense. He can't see any other reason for her to marry him. Rodney explains the Emperor's cold logic. By forcing Callian to marry a bride from a fallen house, he ensures his nephew has no powerful family to back him up. Stella was chosen precisely because she had the least value on the marriage market. This, however, presents an opportunity. Rodney proposes a counterplan. They must turn Stella into an agent for their side. He suggests Callian should play along with her act. Better yet, he should try to charm her first. A slow smirk spreads across Callian's face. He likes the idea. He admits he was already getting tired of her innocent facade. It was time to see who was really playing who in this dangerous game. The next morning, Stella awoke feeling surprisingly refreshed. Despite the intense turn of events the night before, she realized she'd just had the best sleep of her life in the luxurious bed. A memory of their charged moment lingered, making her touch her lips in a daze. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock. A servant's voice came from the other side of the door, informing her that His Grace wished for her to join him for breakfast. She found Callian waiting at a grand dining table laden with an unbelievable feast. He calmly asked if she'd slept well, and she honestly replied that she had. As she took in the amazing food, he suddenly addressed her as "my dear." Stella flinched, completely caught off guard by the affectionate term. Callian played it cool, asking what her plans were for the day. Flustered, Stella admitted that it wasn't his question that surprised Harriet was being called "my dear." Callian's plan to charm his devious bride was officially underway, continuing his charm offensive. Callian suggests Stella invite a friend over for tea, assuring her that he wouldn't mind. The sudden kindness confuses Stella. She thought he wanted her to remain invisible, but she simply states that as her family's former breadwinner, she doesn't have any friends. Internally, Callian recalls his friend's advice to win her over first. He smoothly explains his change in attitude, admitting he was harsh the previous night because he expected a fight. But since she signed the contract, he sees no reason they can't get along for the next 3 years. To emphasize his point, he gently places a piece of food on her plate. The small act of kindness makes Stella's heart pound, and she agrees to do her best not to be a disgrace. Their tentative peace is shattered when a servant announces that her uncle has requested a visit. Stella is puzzled as she hadn't heard from him. Callion's pleasant facade drops instantly. He knows this is actually her manipulative father, and he is not pleased. Playing her part, Stella shyly asks if it would be all right to invite her uncle to the house. Callion's pleasant expression doesn't shift, but his internal thoughts darken immediately. He's convinced she's an imperial spy, and her request only confirms his suspicions. After all, her father is widely known as the Emperor's loyal lapdog, and Callion is certain her innocent act is just a cover for her real mission. He finds her nerve astounding. Outwardly, however, he remains the perfect gentleman. He agrees, reminding her that she is the lady of the house now. Since she can't be put to work, he offers to handle all the preparations for the visit. He takes her hand, noting that rumors say his wife is obsessed with expensive jewelry. Internally, he smirks. He plans to put her to the test, eager to see if her innocent smile holds up when she's faced with a pile of delicious gems. They have a very busy day ahead. Callion continues his gentlemanly act, teasing Stella as they head out for their busy day. She's completely flustered by his playful attitude, admitting she never took him for a jokester. They soon arrive at a luxurious boutique, where the owner rushes out to greet them, ready to show them to a private room. While Callion makes his arrangements, Stella is lost in thought. This drastic change is unsettling. Just yesterday, he looked at her with pure contempt, but now he couldn't be sweeter. She knows a single signature on a contract isn't enough to change a man so completely. She must have some other use to him that she's not aware of. Her spiraling thoughts are cut short by whispers from two other women in the room. They snicker and sneer, spreading the awful rumor that she sold her honor to the Duke. Stella flinches, clutching her hands as the humiliation washes over her. She wonders if this is her purpose, to be a punching bag for high society. But before she can dwell on it, a hand suddenly reaches out toward her. The hand belongs to Callion. He smoothly pulls Stella into his arms, shielding her from the whispers. Startled, she flushes as he leans in, telling her to keep her focus on him, because he's a very jealous man. Flustered by the public display, Stella decides to stop questioning his motives, resolving to simply play the part of the classy wife he seems to want. As a maid leads them into a private room, Callion glances back at the two women who are whispering. His cold, sharp look is enough to make them flinch and fall silent. He's making it clear that his new wife is off limits to petty gossip. Meanwhile, in another lavish estate, a prominent noblewoman receives a report. She's informed that Stella has already invited her uncle to the house, even before meeting her new mother-in-law. The woman's expression hardens. It seems the new bride has a lot to learn, and she decides she will be the one to personally teach her a lesson in proper etiquette. Inside the lavish boutique, Stella looks at the glittering dresses and jewels with a quiet sigh. Callion watches her, assuming she's found something she wants. He gently taps her hand, making her jump, and asks if anything has caught her eye. Leaning in with a sly smile, he tells her to just say the word, and it's hers. Completely flustered, Stella quickly refuses, saying she doesn't want to be a burden. She insists that he's already given her more than enough. All she wants is to fulfill her part of the contract, so she asks him not to feel obligated to lavish her with presents. Her refusal surprises Callion. He had expected her to live up to her reputation and demand expensive gifts. But instead of begging, she's turning down his offer. He finds her behavior unexpectedly cunning. Her modesty doesn't push him away. Instead, it makes him want to pamper her even more. Callion inwardly debates Stella's motives, wondering if her modesty is just a clever strategy to make him want to dote on her. Annoyed with himself for nearly falling for it, his thoughts are broken when he accidentally brushes her hand. Stella flinches and he quickly pulls away. Looking up, she notices his red face and asks if he's all right. Completely flustered, Callion apologizes, but then sees her own hand is trembling. He softens, asking if she's unwell and should go home. Shocked by her delicate appearance, he privately compares her to cotton candy. The thought makes him blush even harder. Trying to recover, he chalks it up to being new to the whole marriage situation. He suddenly understands the Emperor's true scheme, to use Stella's disarming nature to make him vulnerable. With a newfound resolve and a charming smile, Callion leans in and asks her to continue letting him help her. A completely bewildered Stella can only stammer out an agreement. With a new plan in mind, Callion decides to play the Emperor's game. He figures if he acts vulnerable, it will encourage Stella to get careless with her spy work. He leans in close, catching her off guard, and smoothly asks if she's sure he can do anything to help. A flustered Stella tries to explain her gratitude, but he cuts her off with a smirk, saying he'll let rumors fly that he's crazy about her. He continues to tease her, asking if she likes it when a man gets a little rough. As she protests, he gently strokes her neck, making her gasp. Annoyed with her innocent act, he suddenly pulls her onto his lap, leaving her speechless. He then brings up the child she had mentioned, questioning how they could ever have one if she was this sensitive. Stella immediately refers to their contract, but Callian twists her words, asking if she'd want his child if the contract didn't forbid it. Before she can answer, a noblewoman enters with jewelry, freezing in shock at the compromising scene. A young noblewoman in a striking red dress storms into her father's study. Unfazed, the man calmly looks up from his paperwork and asks what has his daughter so upset. She dramatically throws herself onto a sofa, declaring that he won't believe the latest gossip circulating about Stella Ambrose. Apparently, Duke Rochester just purchased a staggering 17 sets of jewelry for his new fiancé. But the real scandal, the woman insists, is how it all went down. According to her friend who was at the boutique, Stella shamelessly picked out the expensive jewels, while sitting right on the Duke's lap. She snaps her fingers in frustration, questioning how someone like Stella could possibly melt the heart of the notoriously icy Duke Rochester. She scoffs that Stella has nothing to offer but her looks, before hinting that the scandalous rumors don't even stop there. The rumors of Prince Callian's infatuation with Stella spread like wildfire through high society. A noblewoman named Julia contemplates the news, wondering if Stella is already expecting an heir. She quickly dismisses the thought, certain that Stella is too naive about men for that to be possible. Elsewhere, Julia's father receives a timely invitation, pulling everyone into the same tense social circle. At the lavish gathering, Julia spots Stella. Her gaze immediately locks onto the brilliant jewels Stella wears, which seems to confirm the rumors in her mind. She internally scoffs, thinking the gems must be a reward for carrying a Childa prize she feels Stella doesn't deserve. But her bitter thoughts are cut short when she sees whose hand Stella is holding. It's Prince Callian himself. Julia's jealousy finds a new target. The true reward wasn't the jewelry, but the man. As Julia glares, Callian's eye twitches with subtle irritation at the unfolding drama. Just as the tension thickens, Julia approaches and grabs Stella's wrist. She feigns friendly surprise, asking how Stella is feeling since she was too unwell to attend Julia's wedding. With a confident grin, Stella assures her that there's no need to worry. As they talk, nearby maids begin to whisper amongst themselves. They are struck by the uncanny resemblance between Stella and Julia, remarking that they could easily be mistaken for twins. Callian overhears their comments and privately scoffs at the idea, seeing no similarity whatsoever. He clears his throat, loudly announcing he sees no resemblance and there must be something wrong with the maid's eyes. To break the awkward silence, Julia's father steps in, suggesting they shouldn't spend the whole time outside. He then asks Prince Callian for a tour of the manor. Callian glances at Stella, who gives him a subtle nod of approval. Not waiting for an invitation, Julia clings to Stella and excitedly demands a tour of her room. Stella flinches at the pushy display. She turns to Callian, politely asking for his permission to head upstairs. He smiles warmly and agrees, calling her my dear. However, beneath his calm exterior, Callian is suspicious. He feels Julia's father is deliberately trying to separate him from Stella, and makes a mental note to have them watched. The father simply laughs, dismissing his daughter's behavior as immaturity. Upstairs, Julia is stunned by the opulent room. She rushes straight to the vanity and begins rummaging through the expensive jewelry without permission. Picking up a sparkling bracelet, she asks if she can try it on. Stella's face firms up. She calmly tells Julia to put them down, clarifying that they were all personal gifts from His Grace, making them off limits. Julia's attitude sours instantly. She snaps back, insisting she just wanted to try the jewelry on, not keep it. Her entitled whining suddenly reminds Stella of her younger sister, Mary, begging for another helping of food. The uncanny resemblance makes Stella stifle a small laugh. Seeing this, Julia's friendly facade shatters. She glares at Stella, her voice dripping with venom. She asks if a few fancy jewels make Stella feel superior, or if having the Duke's backing gives her the right to laugh at her. Shocked by the hostility, Stella asks how she could say something so cruel. Just as quickly, Julia bursts into laughter, brushing it all off as a simple joke. She claims she was just testing Stella's readiness for high society, putting on an expensive necklace herself. Julia explains that she was merely seeing if Stella could handle the pressure. After all, she adds, their father is worried that Stella's inadequacy will damage the Rochester family's reputation. Julia slips the necklace off, telling Stella she's only trying to help. After all, they're both from the Ambrose family, so she's just pointing out Stella's flaws before someone else does. With a smug laugh, Julia then twirls around the opulent room, wondering aloud if she should just move in. Her friendly act dissolves into pure spite. She sneers that if she used her charms the way Stella supposedly did, she might also land a rich husband. The air chills. Stella calls Julia's name, her voice dangerously quiet, asking if she's finished. With a trembling hand, Stella declares her profound disappointment in Julia's conduct, even questioning the character of Julia's father for raising such an ill-mannered daughter. Outraged, Julia demands to know what right Stella has to say such a thing. Stella calmly sets her straight. They aren't both Ambroses anymore. She is a Rochestera duchess, and that means new boundaries. She turns to a maid and orders her to prepare a separate room for Julia, effectively dismissing her, leaving Julia speechless and seething with impotent rage. Julia's fury boils over. She shrieks that a few jewels can't give Stella the class she lacks and hurls the heavy necklace right at her. The sharp piece of jewelry flies through the air, striking Stella hard across the cheek and breaking the skin. As Stella cries out her cousin's name, the maids look on in horror. Elsewhere, Duke Rochester paces the halls, a deep sense of unease settling over him. An attendant tries to reassure him that the doctor is tending to the Duchess. But Rochester dismisses the concern, claiming he just had a bad feeling. Unable to shake it, he bursts into the room and finds Stella with a fresh cut on her face and a bandaged hand. Just then, Duke Rochester storms into the room, a sudden sense of dread having pulled him there. He rushes to Stella's side, demanding to know if she's hurt. Startled, Stella quickly downplays the incident, insisting she's fine and that the blood isn't hers. Rochester gently touches her face, his gaze telling her he doesn't believe a word. He says he's glad she wasn't seriously injured, but his expression darkens ominously. A cold fury settles in his eyes. He resolves to find Mrs. Pope and get the full story. And his chilling look promises that whoever is responsible will soon regret their actions. Duke Rochester gently touches the fresh cut on Stella's cheek, his finger coming away stained with blood. Flustered, Stella quickly insists that she's fine. In the background, another woman confronts a fuming Julia, demanding she apologize at once. Julia scoffs, refusing to say sorry to someone she considers beneath her, and storms out of the room. The woman promises Stella she'll handle Julia, but Stella says the injured maid is the one who needs to see a doctor. Later, an attendant gives Rochester a simple summary of the incident. He dismisses her, and as he walks down the hall alone, his thoughts turn cold. The fact that even Julia would dare to disrespect his wife fills him with a quiet fury. He recalls her family acting strangely and his tense meeting with Stella's father just an hour before. It's clear to him now that this situation is far more complicated than it appears. During his tense meeting with Duke Rochester, Stella's father attempts to sow seeds of doubt. He claims a girl like Stella is lucky to marry someone of Rochester's status, but then immediately starts spreading vile rumors about her reputation. He frames this slander as a father's humble concern, questioning if the marriage is a wise decision. Rochester, however, is not fooled by the act. He calmly sips his tea and tells the man to stop wasting his time and get straight to the point. Startled, the father stammers that he was just expressing his worries. But the Duke has heard enough. Rising from his chair, Rochester's voice turns cold. He declares the man's concern unnecessary and warns him that he should only be worried about himself. He doesn't tolerate gossip about his people. As Rochester walks away, his mind races. He wonders if Stella is a spy, and the bullying incident was just a performance to earn his sympathy and lower his guard. He won't be easily deceived. Duke Rochester finds Stella in the hallway, telling her she should have waited in her room for him. Looking downcast, Stella admits she was worried he was angry with her. She apologizes for causing a commotion and wasting his time, saying it was not the behavior of an elegant duchess. Rochester gently takes her bandaged hand and corrects her. He wasn't angry, he was distraught. Seeing her injured, he couldn't have been anything else. Stella insists it's only a minor issue, but he pulls her closer, a small smile playing on his lips. He asks if he isn't allowed to be concerned about her. Realizing she was worried he'd punish his cousin, he teases that what happens to Julia now depends entirely on what Stella does. Meanwhile, in another room, Julia sweeps the table clean in a furious tantrum. She seethes over being told to apologize, ranting about how insufferable her cousin has become. Meanwhile, Julia's rage continues to boil. A maid is crumpled on the floor as she scoffs at the idea that Stella achieved her new status on her own. She sits down, convinced that everything Stella has is thanks to her father and that the Duke's affection is temporary. Her mind drifts to Rochester. She remembers, sensing something was wrong the moment she greeted him, when he immediately averted his gaze. She reasons that after so much time in the military, he must be completely enchanted now that he has someone to keep him company at night. Julia decides that Stella isn't special at all. Any woman in that position could capture his heart. A cunning smirk spreads across her face. She thinks that since she's also a noblewoman, there's no reason why she shouldn't be the one to share his bed and win his affection. She's ready to make her move. With Julia's fate hanging in the balance, Rochester shifts his attention back to Stella. He picks up a piece of fruit, smiling as he announces his plan. Since her arm is hurt, he will hand-feed her until she's better. Stella blushes, completely flustered by the suggestion. She points out that she hurt her left arm and is right-handed. but she doesn't want to seem rude by rejecting his gesture. Hesitantly, she accepts the bite. After eating, she shyly tells him she's full. Rochester's expression becomes intense, and Stella instantly worries she's made him angry. In reality, he's just thinking about how cute she is. He insists she's too skinny and must eat more. But before he can offer another bite, a knock echoes through the room. It's Julia, walking in with a disarming smile and asking for a moment. She offers a casual apology, but Rochester immediately interjects, telling her who she really needs to apologize to. Duke Rochester coolly redirects Julia, telling her that Stella is the one who deserves an apology, not him. He then turns his full attention to her, noting that since she is his wife's cousin, he'd like to speak with her candidly. A nervous Julia agrees. When Rochester brings up the trouble from earlier, she quickly dismisses Stella's side of the story, calling her overly dramatic. That's the wrong move. Rochester slowly rises from his chair and walks toward her. He reveals that he already spoke to her father, whom he found to be delusional. Leaning in close, he delivers a crushing insult, remarking that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. With an icy glare, he gives her a final warning: stop causing his wife distress. He adds that Stella already gets enough of that from him, causing her to blush. Confident that Julia understands his message, Rochester excuses himself, leaving her completely frozen and humiliated. Duke Rochester approaches Stella before they join the others for dinner, gently taking her hand. With a charming smile, he explains he couldn't wait any longer because he missed her. Completely flustered, Stella blushes and admits she doesn't know how to respond to such a direct compliment. Just then, Julia's father calls out from the dining table, announcing that they've been waiting. Ignoring him, Rochester leans in close to Stella and playfully whispers for her to say she's been waiting for him as well. She shyly obliges with a nervous laugh. As they join the table, Julia's father offers a loud, fake-sounding compliment about how well Stella is doing. Julia, however, simply glares from her seat, muttering insults under her breath. Later, another guest completely ignores Rochester's attempt at political discussion. He turns his attention to Stella and patronizingly offers to cut her steak, pointing out her injury. The sudden focus makes Stella flinch, clearly uncomfortable with the unwanted attention. The guest's offer makes Stella flinch, but she politely declines, claiming she's full. Taking this as his cue, Duke Rochester suggests they have a late snack together. Stella gets flustered, but Julia interrupts, announcing that Stella will be sleeping with her tonight. Unfazed, Rochester smoothly reminds Julia that he and Stella are newlyweds, causing Stella to blush deeply. She chides him for saying such things in front of a child like Julia. This insult sets Julia off. She fires back that Stella is the real child, then drops a bombshell, accusing her of faking a pregnancy to trap the Ducaire rumor she claims is all over high society. The atmosphere freezes. Rochester calmly sets down his silverware. He notes he was willing to be lenient because she had apologized earlier, but she has just crossed the line. Julia tries to backtrack, insisting she was just looking out for Stella, but her defense crumbles as she bursts into tears. As Julia bursts into tears, she starts wailing about how everyone is unfairly blaming her. She yells that Stella was hers until Duke Rochester took her away, questioning why she's the one in trouble. But her tantrum has an unexpected effect on Stella, who simply sees a spoiled child, much like her younger sister, Mary. Deciding not to indulge the behavior, Stella calmly tells Julia that crying is pointless and that she needs to apologize immediately. Watching from his seat, Duke Rochester has to cover his mouth to keep from laughing out loud at Stella's firm handling of the situation. This only enrages Julia further, who feels completely humiliated. Later, Julia fumes in front of her father. He gently suggests her accusation was uncalled for, but she dismisses him as being too soft. Her expression turns cold as she declares she will handle things her own way from now on. Her new goal is clear. She's going to steal the Duke and become the Duchess herself. Later, while fuming to her father, Julia listens as a friend gushes about how Duke Rochester looked at Stella during dinner with eyes full of love, as if she were a precious doll. But Julia has a much colder plan in mind. She declares her new goal. She will steal the Duke from Stella and become the Duchess herself. Her father is shocked, having believed the high society rumor that Stella was already with child. Julia just smirks, confirming that it was all a lie. Back in the hall, Stella stands her ground, demanding a proper apology. Outraged, Julia initially refuses to apologize to someone she calls a lowly servant, but with all eyes on her, she gives in. With a mocking curtsy, she offers a quick, insincere apology before asking if Stella is happy. When a maid tries to object to the disrespectful tone, Stella calmly accepts it, telling her it's all right. Julia smugly tells the maid to listen to her. With her fake apology done, Julia complains that Stella's behavior disrespects both her and the Duke. She then grabs Stella's injured hand, causing a sharp sting of pain. Leaning in, she asks a shockingly rude question about Stella's first night as a married woman. While a nearby lady calls her out, Julia just feigns innocence, begging for details. Stella remains completely unfazed. She calmly tells Julia that acting cute won't always get her what she wants, adding that even little Mary knows that. Internally, Julia scoffs, thinking Stella has always been simple-minded and easy to fool. She fakes a few tears, claiming she's terrified of her own wedding night and needs Stella's advice to prepare herself. It's a trick she's sure will work, but Stella sees right through it. Realizing Julia has graduated from a mere crybaby to a manipulative one, she makes a surprising move. She pulls the stunned girl into a hug, softly apologizing for yelling earlier. The sudden, disarming kindness leaves Julia completely speechless, caught off guard by a reaction she never expected. Still holding Julia, Stella calmly drops a bombshell. She explains she has no wedding night advice to give because, due to personal feminine reasons, nothing actually happened between her and the Duke. Julia is completely floored. The biggest rumor flying through high society that Stella was already carrying the Duke's heir was completely false. Later, Julia sits with her father, finally letting out a sigh of relief. She confirms Stella isn't pregnant, just as she'd said. Her father, while relieved, questions if she's truly confident in her plan to win the Duke over. Julia simply scoffs at his worry. She boasts that a man like Duke Rochester is easy to handle, claiming she can control him with a flick of her wrist. That night, Duke Rochester is enjoying a quiet moment alone on the palace grounds. He seems lost in thought until the sound of footsteps makes him turn. His serious expression immediately softens into a faint smile as he sees Stella approaching him. As Duke Rochester stands alone, a figure approaches. For a moment, he thinks it's Stella, but he quickly realizes it's Julia, who is intentionally dressed to look just like her, complete with a wig. Annoyed, Rochester coldly asks what she did to her hair. Julia deflects, asking if he thinks she looks nice. She then moves in closer, bringing up the fact that Stella supposedly ruined their first night together. She places a hand on his chest, claiming Stella sent her as an apology to satisfy him in her place. Rochester seems skeptical, questioning if Stella really sent her. Julia scoffs, calling Stella a square who could never please him, and promises to show him how much better she can be. But her scheme unravels when she makes a critical mistake. She leans in and whispers that they must be quiet, because her room is right next to Stella's. The lie immediately falls apart, and Julia freezes. Realizing she just exposed her entire plan, Duke Rochester lets his cigarette fall to the ground. Julia's insults echo in his mind first. She questioned his wife's honor, and now she calls her a square who can't satisfy him. He finally asks the question that's been bothering him. Was she the one who spread those rumors? Before she can answer, he yanks the cheap wig from her head, exposing her completely. Panicked, Julia desperately tries to lie, claiming Stella gave her permission and that they even made a bet. But Rochester isn't buying it. His eyes burn with cold fury as he grabs her by the necklace. Calling her a liar, he reveals the cruel truth. Stella had no idea the rumors were started by her own beloved cousin. He pulls her closer, giving her a chilling ultimatum. She will tell him the truth now, or he will make sure she pays the ultimate price for her deception. The next morning, Stella searches the quiet mansion for her cousin. She wanders through the grand halls, wondering where Julia could have gone. Finally, she pushes open a set of ornate doors and finds Duke Rochester sitting calmly, reading the morning paper. He greets her with a pleasant smile and asks where she's been. Stella explains she was looking for Julia but couldn't find her anywhere. Without missing a beat, Rochester informs her that Julia went home in a hurry the previous night. Stella is surprised her cousin left without saying goodbye. Still, she observes that Julia has really become mature. At this, Rochester visibly flinches. He lowers his paper and asks her to repeat who she thinks has matured. Unaware of his reaction, Stella fondly remembers how her cousin used to borrow jewelry, only to take the entire box home with her. She genuinely believes Julia has changed, not knowing the truth of last night's events. Stella continues talking about Julia, completely unaware of her cousin's true nature. She fondly remembers how Julia used to follow her around like she was her mother. Stella explains that while Julia may have a blunt way of speaking, she has a sensitive soul. Watching from his seat, Rochester thinks she is a foolish woman for being so naive. He knows the awful things Julia said and believes Stella shouldn't have such a soft spot for her. Suddenly, he stands up, grabs a surprised Stella by the waist, and swiftly pulls her onto his lap. She gasps, telling him to put her down, but he simply replies that it's too late. Leaning in close, he makes her blush deeply. Stella stammers that for a second she thought he was going to kiss her. A small smile plays on his lips as his own heart pounds. He looks her directly in the eyes and confirms her suspicion, telling her she was right. Then he presents a sparkling jewelry box, leaving her completely baffled. While Stella remains blissfully unaware, the real reason for her cousin's hasty departure is revealed. In a fit of rage, Julia demands to know why she's being sent to a convent, but her father offers no sympathy. He reminds her how she boasted about controlling the Duke, a plan that backfired completely. It turns out Julia's scheme was to impersonate Stella and get close to Rochester during the night. The Duke, however, was not fooled. He angrily confronted her, ripping the stolen jewelry from her neck and demanding answers. When a terrified Julia tried to blame Stella, Rochester's patience ran out. He accused her of impersonating the Duchess and was prepared to deliver a harsh punishment himself. Her father begged the Duke to spare her life for Stella's sake. Now, facing exile, Julia fumes over her failure, unable to understand what makes Stella so special. Stella's stomach rumbled loudly in the quiet room. It was well past mealtime, yet no one had come to call for her. A nervous sweat broke out on her brow as she realized the maids were nowhere to be seen, almost as if they were intentionally avoiding her. She pulled the bell cord, but the silence that followed confirmed her suspicion. They were ignoring her. Deciding to take matters into her own hands, she walked to the kitchen herself. To her surprise, she found all the maids gathered there. She put on a brave face and politely asked for something to eat. The head maid feigned shock, asking if she hadn't eaten yet. Stella simply explained that she was still unfamiliar with the estate's schedule. The maid sighed but agreed to bring a meal upstairs. As Stella turned to leave, cruel whispers followed her down the hall. The staff openly called her a pig and a moocher, making sure she could hear every word. She clenched her fists, knowing she wasn't welcome, but this blatant hostility was too much to bear. Brushing off the maid's cruel words, Stella decided to let it go. After all, it was just one meal, and she was used to being hungry. She reminded herself that she couldn't afford to cause any trouble that might disappoint the Duke, not while their contract was active. Just then, a commotion erupted from the main hall. A servant shouted for the staff to get into formation immediately. As they scrambled into place, the maids whispered again, blaming the moocher Duchess for the fuss. Stella realized an important guest must have arrived, but her heart dropped when a butler made a grand announcement. Madame Rochester was here. At the bottom of the stairs stood an elegant, intimidating woman who glared up at Stella with disdain. She remarked on the terrible greeting and tapped her fan impatiently against her hand. She then coldly asked if Stella planned on coming down, or if she was just going to stand there staring all day. Late that night, Duke Rochester came looking for Stella, hoping to have a word with her. He entered the drawing room to find her fast asleep on the sofa, clearly exhausted. He stared for a moment, his stern expression faltering as he watched her. He grumbled to himself, wondering if she was purposefully showing him how peaceful she looked in her sleep just to get a reaction. Just then, Stella's eyes fluttered open. Groggy from her nap, she greeted the Duke with a small, tired smile. He quickly asked if she had eaten, then immediately felt awkward for disturbing her rest. She insisted it was fine, explaining she had only dozed off for a moment. Unsure of what to say, he told her it was late and that she should go to bed. He started to suggest they could eat together, but then abruptly turned and walked out, the door shutting firmly behind him. Alone in the hall, Rochester covered his face, completely flustered by the brief encounter. The next morning, Stella is seated at a grand dining table, finally about to get a proper meal. But she isn't alone. Across from her sit two imposing figures, the Duke's relatives, Marianne and Tilgrim Rochester. Just as Stella raises her fork, Marianne comments on her voracious appetite. Tilgrim scoffs, adding that a pretty face is worthless without noble manners, and Stella clearly has a lot to learn. Stella puts her cutlery down, her stomach sinking. She realizes they showed up unannounced just to harass her, and she suspects Madame Rochester is behind it. Putting on a brave face, Stella politely bows her head, hoping they will teach her. But Marianne isn't finished. With a cruel smirk, she asks when Stella's social debut was and who her chaperone was, openly mocking her odd etiquette. Cornered, Stella quietly admits she hasn't had a debut yet. She explains with a hint of shame that her family was struggling financially, and she was too busy trying to help them make ends meet. Marianne feigned an apology, claiming it had simply slipped her mind. Tilgrim snickered, adding that he couldn't believe Stella's father would neglect his duty to provide her with a proper debut. He declared that any respectable father would have begged relatives for the money. Stella's hands clenched under the table. Hearing them insult her father was somehow more infuriating than their insults toward her. Still, she remained silent, acutely aware of her powerless position. She reminded herself that she was sold into this marriage and was only meant to be the Duchess for 3 years. The role she was expected to play was that of an elegant, quiet woman who could endure any insult and be easily controlled. Just as she steeled her resolve, Tilgrim suddenly changed the subject, asking where she had put the white piano. Stella was caught off guard, confused by the question. Tilgrim scoffed, accusing her of getting rid of it already. He remarked that a woman's jealousy was a frightening thing, leaving Stella utterly baffled. With a sly smile, Marianne cuts Tilgrim off, feigning concern. She tells him to be careful with his words, revealing that Stella is clearly in the dark about the piano. The truth is, it was never meant for her, but a gift Callian had prepared for another woman, Janet Weymouth. The name sends a shock through Stella. Tilgrim presses his advantage, mocking their supposed love marriage and suggesting it isn't on solid ground. He insinuates their relationship is purely physical and dishonest. Humiliated, Stella flinches at their unsolicited advice. They tell her to play the piano for Callian, explaining that he loves women with long, beautiful fingers just like Janet's. Stella's gaze drops to her own hands, which are worn and calloused from hard labor. She sadly concludes that Rochester must be repulsed by them. Despite the cruelty, she agrees to practice. Just then, a tired voice sighs from the doorway, cutting through the tension. Good grief. The tense atmosphere is broken by a tired sigh from the doorway. It's Callian, and his unexpected return sends a wave of panic through Tilgrim and Marianne. Ignoring their stammering, he extends a hand to Stella, softly telling her to come to him. As she cautiously approaches, he wraps an arm around her, dismissing his relatives' gossip as completely inaccurate. He finds it baffling to hear them lecturing his own wife about his ideal woman. With everyone watching, he takes Stella's hand, the very one she was just shamed for. He announces that he's going to tell them exactly who his ideal woman is, so they can finally stop spreading lies. Tilgrim and Marianne can only stare as Callian gently raises Stella's calloused hand to his lips and places a kiss on it. He makes his point perfectly clear, declaring that his ideal woman is none other than his wife. Later that night, Callian decides he needs to speak with Stella. He knocks on the door and enters. Later, Callian decides to be upfront with Stella, revealing that he had a former fiancé. The news startles her, and she clutches his arm, asking if this was before her time. He confirms it, adding that she was a well-educated woman from a reputable noble family. In his memory, she was seen as the perfect choice to become the next duchess. He tries to soften the blow by taking Stella's hand and assuring her that she doesn't need to worry, claiming their relationship wasn't particularly close. But Stella feels otherwise. His words don't match the image of them together in his memories. Sensing her discomfort, Callian changes the subject. He gently strokes her hair, telling her she's worked hard and deserves a reward. But his touch feels unpleasant to Stella. She pulls away, insisting she hasn't earned anything and needs to go practice the piano. Before he can react, she turns and walks away, stating she would rather be alone. Callian is left standing in shock, calling out to her. As Stella walks away, Callian is left completely stunned. He had claimed he wanted to give her a reward, but in truth, that was just an excuse to get closer to her. The scene then shifts to a memory from before his marriage, featuring his former fiancée, Jeanette Weimers. In the flashback, Jeanette offers Callian a special tea from a renowned province, commenting on its pleasant scent. However, Callian takes one sip and coolly dismisses it, stating it's not to his taste. A flustered Jeanette promises she will find one he likes next time. Later, she asks how his married life is treating him. Callian confidently replies that it's absolutely wonderful. She reminds him of the doubts he once had about the arrangement, but he cuts her off. He firmly states that was all in the past and refuses to discuss it further. Realizing she overstepped, Jeanette apologizes for being tactless, silenced by his newfound and unwavering commitment. After Jeanette takes her leave, Callian's companion apologizes for her overly affectionate display. He seems genuinely worried, asking if Callian is all right and admitting he feels guilty, as if he stole his own cousin's fiancée. Callian remains unbothered, dismissing his past engagement with Jeanette as nothing more than a simple childhood promise. Although he appears calm, his fist clenches tightly at his side. He has made his choice. With a confident smile, he firmly states that he already has a wife. However, his companion presses further, questioning if they have confirmed Stella Ambrose isn't a spy. The question immediately shatters Callian's composure. His smile disappears, and he sinks into a troubled silence. Despite his outward resolve, it's clear that the vicious rumors surrounding Stella still weigh heavily on his mind, creating a deep internal conflict he can't ignore. Callian's mind raced. He knew another member of the Ambrose family was behind some of the schemes, but that didn't clear Stella of suspicion. Their encounters had always felt too perfectly orchestrated to be mere coincidence. The core problem was simple. He desperately wanted to trust her, but he had no proof. His companion, Radney, watched him carefully. Callian explained that their public affection was just an act, a necessary performance to fool the Emperor. Shifting gears, Radney asked if the rumor from his letter was true. Did the Emperor really have an illegitimate child? Callian confirmed it, sliding a folder across the table. Inside was a portrait of a young man who was the spitting image of the Emperor. Radney was stunned, realizing the boy was 18 conceived while their mother was on her deathbed. As his companion was overcome with emotion, Callian looked on coldly, finding the display of grief disappointing. To him, the solution was obvious. The only way to stop his father was to crown a new king. Callian reveals a devastating truth. On the night the two princes were lost in a tragic fire, the emperor was with his illegitimate child. The news completely shatters Radney. He clutches his chest, disbelief turning to crushing grief as he remembers his lost brothers. He demands to know if it's true, and Callian's silence is all the confirmation he needs. Overwhelmed, Radney asks Callian to leave, saying he needs to get his thoughts in order. As Callian walks away, his expression is cold and calculating. He thinks Radney is a fool for not yet suspecting the true horror that the Emperor himself was the one who started the fire. Callian knows it's too soon to reveal that final piece of the puzzle. To eventually lead a rebellion, he must first secure Radney's unwavering loyalty. His strategic planning is cut short, however, when a mysterious woman in a striking red dress blocks his path. With a confident smile, she informs him that she's been waiting. The mysterious woman in red is revealed to be Stella. She approaches Callian and asks for a private word. After he agrees with a smug look, she clarifies they can't talk here and reaches for his arm to lead him away. But Callian's demeanor instantly shifts. He forcefully swats her hand away, his expression cold as ice. He tells her that whatever she has to say, she can do so in front of everyone. The public rejection visibly stuns Stella. She trembles, clutching her hands as his cruel words echo. The moment sends her mind spiraling back in time, to her childhood. She remembers when she and Callian were first engaged through a family arrangement. It may not have been their choice, but for young Stella, it was a fairy tale. She recalls looking at him with adoring eyes, convinced he was the Prince Charming she had always dreamed of. Now, facing this stranger, she's left wondering how it all fell apart. As his cruel words hang in the air, Stella's mind spirals back to her childhood. She remembers her simple dream, to marry a prince and become a queen. The engagement to Callian felt like a fairy tale, but she recalled a jarring thought. She was far superior to him. Her father had relentlessly fueled this idea. He would grip her hands, telling her she was the family's only hope, and that it was her duty to become queen and elevate their name. She was raised to be the shining star, the perfect flower of high society. Stella remembers the admiration and envy she received at lavish parties. Confident that she was born for this life and deserved nothing but the best, she believed her place was at the pinnacle of power. But the memory shifts, revealing a young Callian standing alone at the top of a grand staircase, looking down as if the world was already his. As her mind drifts back, Stella recalls a pivotal realization from her youth. She had always been told she was destined for the top, but upon seeing a young Callian standing above everyone, radiating pure authority, it all clicked. To become a queen, she needed to marry a real prince, not merely a man who was like one. Back in the present, she puts on a masterful performance. She tells Callian she understands he's angry. She left asserting it's only because he was so deeply in love with her. With tears in her eyes, she tries to reason, explaining he knows how much she longed to be queen. She steps closer, promising that while she may be with another man, her heart will always belong to him. Declaring her love, she embraces him tightly. She then whispers her shock at hearing he had married such a common woman, pleading with him not to destroy himself over the pain she caused. But Callian remains perfectly still, his expression cold. As she continues her dramatic speech, he privately wonders what on earth she's talking about. Convinced she is under a profound delusion, Callian pushes her away, his patience finally snapping. He informs her that her delusion is so profound, he doesn't even know where to begin correcting it. Then he delivers the final, crushing blow. He never once loved her. Stunned into silence, Stella can only stammer in disbelief before accusing him of lying. She reminds him that he was always so kind and sweet to her. Callian simply scoffs at the memory. He bluntly explains that his courtesy was only because of her father's title. Their personal feelings had nothing to do with their engagement. It was purely a business arrangement between their families. He then turns her argument on its head, revealing he knew all along she was just sizing him up against other suitors, calculating who had the best shot at the throne. He tells her their engagement was a matter of necessity. And it's ridiculous for a soon-to-be married woman to be declaring her love for a man who already has a wife. As his words sink in, Stella is left trembling, her entire fabricated reality completely shattered. Callian's hand tightens, crinkling the letter he holds. He internally questions Stella Ambrose's audacity. Love? He scoffs at the very idea, wondering who she thinks she is to speak of it. He sees her declaration for what it truly is, a selfish desire to keep her options open, not a genuine emotion. To claim love, he believes, requires basic sincerity. His thoughts shift to a walk in the garden with his wife. He recalls how she stopped, calling out to him with pure delight. Her eyes were fixed on the flowers, her smile bursting with an honest excitement she couldn't hide. She even got a little flustered, apologizing for getting carried away by the garden's beauty. In that moment, everything becomes clear to Callian. He finally understands his conflict, why he doubts a woman like Stella Ambrose, yet wants to trust his wife. It's because he can plainly see that his painfully innocent contract wife is madly in love with him. Duke Rochester reflects on the complicated history between their families. Every noble knows that House Rochester's sea salt trade was the cause of House Ambrose's collapse. He acknowledges that he played a major role in her family's downfall and fully expected her to resent him for it. He even assumed the forced expression she wore on their wedding night was a mask for her true feelings. Because of this, her declarations of love became a huge obstacle. He muses that if her goal had been to end him, he would have had no problem using her in return. He remembers the image of her holding a dagger, only for it to fall uselessly to the floor. But when she reaches for him with a look of total innocence, it makes him want to believe she's just a pawn, simply being controlled and not understanding any of the politics. He pulls her into a hug. He quickly dismisses the thought as impossible, knowing that for her to truly stand by him, the center of the conflict is just a fantasy. Duke Rochester sees the shadowy forces trying to use Stella as a pawn. He realizes that by agreeing to this arrangement, she's essentially siding with the very people who want to control her. Without another thought, he grabs her wrist and pulls her into a sudden embrace. This was never part of the Emperor's grand scheme. No one could have predicted that the woman sent to be his downfall would genuinely fall in love with him. A new possessive idea forms in his mind. He decides then and there that he must make it impossible for her to ever leave. He will make his love the only thing that matters to her. Later, Stella sits alone in a lavish room, her stomach grumbling loudly. She's starving. She regrets bringing up his past fiancés and admits she skipped breakfast because it was too awkward to face him. When a knock comes at the door, she stays silent, stewing in her embarrassment. But she can't hide forever. She taps the table, resolving that she needs to eat. Stella's stomach growled, a blunt reminder she hadn't eaten. Annoyed and embarrassed, she decided to find the kitchen herself. She had another lesson soon and needed her strength. Surely, no one would physically stop her from getting a meal. As she made her way through the manor, she overheard the staff gossiping. Their whispers were sharp and cruel, calling the new Duchess a joke who could be thrown out at any moment. Stella stopped in her tracks when the conversation took a vicious turn. They were spreading a disgusting rumor that the Duke refused to be seen with her because she was carrying another man's child. The lie hit her like a punch. That ridiculous story had followed her even here. All thoughts of food vanished as she spun around, desperate to get away. Overwhelmed with despair, she didn't watch her step. Her heel slipped on the slick floor, and she crashed hard onto the ground. Stella hit the floor hard. The pain in her knees was nothing compared to the overwhelming urge to run away, lost and defeated. She clutched her dress, unsure of what to do next. But then, Duke Rochester's words echoed in her mind. He had told her she was allowed to be angry, to stand up for herself and be the confident woman he knew she could be. That memory sparked a fire inside her. She resolved to become the person he wanted her to be, with newfound purpose. Stella stormed into the kitchen to face the gossiping maids. One of them smirked, asking if she'd come to complain about their talk. Stella stood tall, reminding them of their duties to the house. She declared that as the Duchess, she would not allow their blatant disrespect to continue. In response, the maids stared back, and one let out a quiet, mocking laugh, clearly unimpressed by her show of authority. The maids erupted into laughter, openly mocking Stella's attempt to exert authority. One of them sneered, daring her to go complain to the Duke about their disrespect. She then delivered a sharp, personal blow, pointing out that since the Duke and Duchess hadn't even finalized their union, he had no reason to believe a word Stella said. The sheer audacity of the comment stunned Stella. How could they speak of such private matters? She knew she couldn't run to the Duke with this problem, something she had to handle herself. A new fire ignited in her eyes. She declared that as the Lady of House Rochester, she would not tolerate their shameless behavior. When one maid scoffed, asking if she planned to fire them, Stella didn't hesitate. She confirmed it was her right as the Duchess, and that's exactly what she was going to do. The maids paled, quickly claiming they were only following orders from another Madame Rochester. Stella glanced around the great hall. She calmly told them that if they wished to serve that woman, they could do so at her house. Then, her voice firm, she gave a final order. Pack their bags and leave immediately. She was the madam of this house. The two maids retreated to their room, panicking. One couldn't believe they were actually getting kicked out, questioning how Stella could be so bold and unafraid of the other Madame Rochester. They knew getting fired was a problem, especially since they had only been following orders. One of the maids came up with a new plan. She smirked, realizing they could go to Mrs. Pope, the head housekeeper, who would surely help them. They rushed to Mrs. Pope's office and laid out their complaint. Mrs. Pope listened calmly, tapping her pen against the desk as they spoke. She repeated their story back to them. The new Duchess had fired them just for following Madame Rochester's orders. The maids eagerly confirmed, expecting her to take their side. However, Mrs. Pope found their story strange. She couldn't understand why Madame Rochester would give them direct orders without consulting her first. When she pressed them for details, the maids faltered, admitting they weren't sure. Pope suspected that if they weren't lying, someone had impersonated her superior. Deciding to investigate, she told them she would hear them out. After the confrontation, Stella felt a wave of unease. She knew firing those two maids didn't solve the core issue, especially if the other Madame Rochester was pulling the strings. A knock broke her thoughts. It was Mrs. Pope, the head housekeeper, stepping inside to check if she was all right. Stella was confused, pointing out that it wasn't time for their scheduled lesson. Mrs. Pope calmly explained that she had just interviewed the kitchen maids. Stella immediately assumed she was in trouble for firing them, without permission. However, Mrs. Pope clarified she was only there to clear up a misunderstanding. She stated that Madame Rochester never gave those maids any such orders. Taking Stella's hand, the housekeeper revealed the two liars had been locked up until the Duke returns to investigate. Despite this, Stella couldn't shake her insecurity. She confessed her fear that the other woman genuinely disliked her, whispering that she felt undeserving of someone like Duke Rochester. Mrs. Pope tried to soothe Stella's fears, clarifying that the other Madame Rochester likely felt indifference toward her, not hatred. Hearing this from the kind housekeeper, Stella felt a wave of relief wash over her. A small, genuine smile appeared on her face as she admitted Mrs. Pope's words had calmed her down significantly. Later, Mrs. Pope met with the other Madame Rochester. The housekeeper found it odd that this woman would call Stella a liar while claiming to love the Duke, especially since their own marriage was one of separate rooms and no real intimacy. Mrs. Pope firmly stated she didn't believe Stella was a bad person. The woman scoffed, sipping her tea. She argued that if Stella were so decent, she would have at least tried to greet her by now. Still, she conceded that Mrs. Pope's opinion held some weight. A memory of Stella's vulnerability flashed in the housekeeper's mind, and she smiled, declaring the Duke had truly found a decent wife. Surprised by this display, the other woman remarked it had been a long time since she'd seen Mrs. Pope smile so genuinely. Duke Rochester strode into his grand estate, greeted by the head housekeeper, Mrs. Pope. His first thought was of Stella, and he immediately asked where she was. Mrs. Pope, however, had urgent news. She stopped him, explaining a serious incident involving his new wife. Some of the maids had been openly insulting Stella. Rochester's pleasant demeanor vanished. The housekeeper then revealed the worst of it. The maids had been withholding Stella's food, and she had been missing meals since their wedding. Mrs. Pope had only just found out, as she'd been away. An icy calm settled over Rochester. He questioned if his staff truly dared to disrespect the house in such a way, his voice low and dangerous. He demanded the maids be brought to him at once. Kneeling before him, the terrified women quickly blamed his mother for their actions. But the Duke wasn't buying it. He tapped his foot, simply stating their claim was nonsense. Duke Rochester coolly dismissed the maids' claims. He stated his mother was far too high-minded to resort to such petty games and demanded the truth. His expression darkened as he proposed a different theory, asking if they were spies sent by the emperor. The accusation sent a wave of panic through the women. They frantically denied any connection to His Majesty, insisting they would never dream of such a thing. Backed into a corner, their hands trembling, they changed their story. One of the maids confessed that Stella herself had ordered them to withhold her food. The maid claimed Stella believed that by appearing to starve, the Duke would take pity on her and pay her more attention. Rochester immediately saw through the ridiculous excuse. Realizing it must be a cover story designed for use if caught, he calmly called for Mrs. Pope and ordered her to bring his wife. He declared that with Stella present, they would finally discover who was lying. Duke Rochester gave the maids one final warning, stating the truth would be revealed the moment his wife arrived. Still, they refused to be honest, scrambling for a new excuse. One of the women insisted they hadn't starved Stella at all. She claimed they fed her in secret, and Stella had even given them gifts as thanks. As proof, the maid pulled out a wooden pendant, a piece of jewelry far too expensive for their wages. Rochester's gaze fell on the item. He instantly recognized the crest of House Ambrose, but he also noticed a crucial detail: the wood was a rare type, used exclusively by the Imperial Palace. Just then, the door creaked open and Stella walked in, completely unaware of the situation. Rochester calmly explained he had discovered the maids were intentionally harassing her. He then looked her straight in the eyes and asked a simple question: how would she like them punished? Stella was stunned, stammering that surely being fired was punishment enough. Duke Rochester says nothing in response to Stella's suggestion. Instead, he turns the interrogation over to a stern-looking woman, Mrs. Pope, who promises to continue questioning the maids. With the culprits now in capable hands, Rochester approaches Stella, his demeanor softening. He gently suggests they step outside to talk. His first question is simple and direct, asking if she has eaten dinner yet. Stella, clearly flustered by the attention, looks away and insists that she is fine. This quiet, caring exchange leaves the maids on the floor completely stunned. They had assumed the Duke and his new wife didn't get along, yet here he was acting incredibly affectionate. While they reel from this revelation, Mrs. Pope looms over them, ready to get the real story. Meanwhile, Rochester reflects on what truly tipped him off. It wasn't just their inconsistent lies, it was a specific telling mistake they made when speaking about the Duchess. As Rochester led Stella away, his mind was elsewhere. It wasn't the maid's flimsy pendant that exposed them. The real problem ran much deeper. He knew the Emperor had been planting spies in his house for years, and the memories of past betrayals made it almost impossible for him to trust anyone. He thought he had rooted them all out, but clearly some vipers remained. The Duke realized the maid's specific lie about the Duchess was no accident. It was a calculated move by the Emperor, designed to sow discord between Rochester, his mother, and his new wife. Turning to Stella, he gently patted her shoulder, reassuring her that he wasn't mad, and that she handled the situation perfectly. For Stella, this small gesture of kindness was everything. She recalled his earlier advice to become a wife who is loved, and it gave her the courage she needed. She finally understood his strange warning had been for her protection all along. Rochester observed how transparent Stella's feelings were, noting that she seemed ready to open up to him. He gently encouraged her to always have courage and speak her mind. Bolstered by his words, a blushing Stella immediately tested his offer, asking if she could be honest and admit that she was very famished. Her simple, earnest confession broke the tension, and a genuine smile spread across Rochester's face. He admitted he was about to pass out from hunger himself and suggested they go eat. Later that night, the true nature of the conspiracy became clear. Mrs. Pope delivered her report. The wooden crest given to the maids was made of cedar, a material that traced it directly back to the imperial palace. Rochester remarked that his enemies weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. Mrs. Pope then revealed the maids' confession. They had been manipulated by a cloaked figure pretending to be Rochester's mother, who had warned them that Stella would be a threat to the family and urged them to protect the household. Mrs. Pope confirmed Rochester's suspicions. The maid's backup plan was to blame the Duchess if they were ever caught, a classic and often fatal tactic for spies. He grimly acknowledged this, knowing the Emperor surely had more pawns hidden throughout his home. He resolved to stay on high alert and deal with them as needed. Just then, another problem announced itself with a knock on his door. Mrs. Pope entered, carrying an urgent message from the police. Rochester took the letter, and as he read it, his eye began to twitch with irritation. The news was absurd. A recent police raid on a gambling den went wrong, and someone ended up dead. The prime suspect currently in custody was none other than Stella's father. To make the situation even more complicated, the police chief was writing to ask for the Duke's opinion on the matter before officially starting an investigation into his new father-in-law. Rochester stared at the page, wondering what kind of lunacy this was. Duke Rochester arrives at the local jail, striding down a grim stone corridor. He remarks that this is hardly the place he expected to find a noble, but the officer explains they had no choice. The case involved a homicide, and Stella's father was not only found without identification, but he also tried to flee the scene. Dressed in rags, they first mistook him for a common vagrant. Rochester immediately grasps the real reason for the summons. The police are looking for a payout to sweep this under the rug. The officer leads him to a cell, but Rochester dismisses him, saying his people outside will provide whatever is needed. The officer bows, hands over the key, and promptly leaves. Behind the bars, a disheveled and desperate Count Ambrose scrambles forward, calling out the Duke's name. Rochester looks down at his future father-in-law, with disdain, wondering what kind of mess he's gotten himself into this time. A cold smirk crosses his face as he thinks about how devastated Stella would be if she ever found out. Inside the jail cell, a pathetic Count Ambrose begs Rochester to leave him behind, wailing that he can't be a burden to his daughter any longer. But Rochester is completely unmoved by the display. He calls the Count foolish, telling him that walking away from this disaster would solve nothing. With a heavy clunk, Rochester unlocks the cell door and steps inside. He gets straight to the point, reminding the Count of the life that was lost and asking if he seriously thought he could hide it from Stella. He tells him to think rationally about who would be hurt the most by this scandal. Then the Duke extends a hand. He states plainly that he will not stand by and watch his future wife suffer because of her father's poor choices. Grasping at the lifeline, the Count takes his hand, stammering apologies. Rochester cuts him off. He clarifies that his help isn't free, it comes with a condition, leaving the Count stunned and fearful. Dressed in an elegant gown, Stella wonders aloud if she truly looks the part of Madame Rochester. She privately admits that she views the Duchess as the very picture of a noblewoman and wants to be just like her. Her companion, Mrs. Pope, seems regretful, explaining that her frequent trips to the capital meant she wasn't aware of the hardships Stella had faced at the estate. Just as Mrs. Pope begins to apologize, Stella gently cuts her off. She compliments the delightful lunch, noting that ever since she casually mentioned liking potatoes, the dish has appeared at every single meal. Taking the older woman's hands, she insists that such thoughtfulness is apology enough and that she feels nothing but gratitude. Their warm moment is interrupted by a knock at the door. A servant announces that Duke Rochester has arrived. A small smile plays on Stella's lips as she realizes he's home early, and she politely postpones the rest of her lesson for the day. As Stella descends the grand staircase, she reminds herself to maintain a noble posture. Seeing Rochester at the bottom, she calls out a formal greeting. He steps forward, catching her hands as she reaches the last step. A blush colors her cheeks as she softly welcomes him back. With a warm smile, he replies that he's home. Stella remarks that she wasn't expecting him so early, given his busy schedule. The Duke explains that he brought guests with him. Instantly flustered, Stella worries that she isn't dressed properly for visitors. Rochester quickly puts her at ease, telling her she looks beautiful just the way she is. As the main doors begin to open, she turns and asks who the guests could possibly be. Her jaw drops. Standing in the entryway is her father, beaming as he calls her name. Beside him, her mother laughs warmly. Overcome with shock, Stella rushes toward them, her first concern being whether her mother was well enough to travel. With tears in her eyes, Stella confessed how worried she'd been. Her mother quickly reassured her, explaining that the Duke had sent a very skilled doctor, and she now felt like a whole new person. Just then, a small voice called out. It was Mary, Stella's younger sister, peeking from behind her father before rushing forward for a hug. Stella scooped Mary into her arms, overjoyed to see her looking so healthy and well-fed. The little girl proudly confirmed she had been finishing all of her meals. When Stella asked about Sanderson, her parents chuckled, explaining that he was so excited about the visit that he'd stayed up all night and was now fast asleep in the coach. As Stella laughed, her father's demeanor shifted. He called her name, his friendly expression gone. With a sudden, unnerving grin, he announced that there was something important he had to tell her, casting a shadow over the joyful reunion. When a noble family faces difficult times, hard work isn't always the solution they choose. It's often considered more dignified to simply marry off a daughter and live comfortably on her dowry. This was the path the Ambrose family took. Stella Ambrose was sold by her own father, her consent never part of the equation. The price paid for her was more than enough to secure a life of luxury, but it cost her freedom. Meanwhile, a powerful nobleman was looking into a dark incident. His aide reported back on a recent death, explaining that a massive dowry had been lost entirely to gambling. The situation was suspicious, as the man who lost everything was led to a rigged gambling den by his own brother, Basil Ambrose. A fight broke out, and a life was lost. Sensing a deliberate plot, the nobleman ordered his aide to investigate Basil. He also instructed him to find the victim's family, compensate them, and ensure their silence. Just then, his office doors opened. It was Stella, asking if he'd had a busy day and inviting him to dinner. Duke Rochester wakes to find Stella in his doorway, inviting him to dinner. With a relaxed smile, he agrees to join her. Later, Stella is overjoyed to be dining with her entire family, a gathering orchestrated by the Duke. However, the cheerful atmosphere sours when her mother notices how anxious her husband is. Stella's father nervously admits that the family will be leaving the capital soon and won't see her anymore. His wife is shocked by the sudden declaration. Internally, the father is panicking, barely stopping himself from blurting out the whole truth. He convinces himself that the Duke has taken care of everything. All he has to do is leave Stella behind as planned. A dark memory of a messy confrontation flashes in his mind, along with a quiet agreement to bury the entire incident. Back at dinner, Rochester explains that he not only wanted to comfort Stella by bringing her family, but also needed to finalize his discussion with her father, tying him directly to their shady deal. At the dinner table, Stella tries to make conversation, remembering her brother had something to say at the entrance. The pleasant mood shatters when her father nervously announces the family is leaving the capital. He claims it's for Sanderson studies, but the excuse feels weak. Confused, Stella questions his logic. Wouldn't it be easier to study in the city? She begs them to stay. reminding them how little they see each other as it is. Her mother jumps in to support the lie, mentioning a famous tutor in the countryside and promising to write often. Defeated, Stella quietly accepts their decision. Noticing her disappointment, Duke Rochester tells her not to be too upset. He smoothly promises to do his best so she won't feel the emptiness of their absence. His words seem kind, but they also seal her fate. Her mother, oblivious, simply thanks the Duke for his reassuring presence, solidifying the arrangement that leaves Stella behind in his care. Stella puts on a brave face for her guests, calmly assuring a countess that she can handle all of her new responsibilities. Later that night, however, her younger brother, Basil, finds her with a deeply worried expression. He cuts straight to the point, asking if she is genuinely happy with this marriage. Unable to sleep, Basil wanders out onto a balcony and spots a tense meeting in the garden below. It's his father and Duke Rochester. Eavesdropping, Basil hears the Duke's cold assessment of their family's situation. He speaks of their ruined finances, their sick mother, and a father who refuses to take responsibility. The Duke makes it clear that this deal was the only way to save them. His final words are the most chilling. The best thing their father can do for Stella is to disappear completely. Stunned into silence, Basil is left alone on the balcony, now burdened with this terrible secret. Stunned by the Duke's harsh words to his father, the young boy struggles to process everything. His confusion quickly boils over into pure anger. He clenches his fists, declaring that he hates the Duke and insisting his sister is far too good for a man like that. Overwhelmed with frustration, he wishes he were an adult, strong enough to protect Stella from having to marry someone so awful. As if sensing his distress, Stella appears with a gentle smile and opens her arms. She calls him Sanderson, inviting him into a warm hug. He rushes to her, and she holds him close, gently teasing him for still being a baby. To calm his fears, she leans in and shares a secret. The Duke promised that if things ever get too hard, she can simply run away. Hope flickers in Sanderson's eyes. Stella adds that in 3 years, they might even live together again. Reassured, the boy soon drifts off to sleep. With her brother now occupying her bed, Stella finds herself at Duke Rochester's door, explaining she has nowhere else to sleep. Standing before Duke Rochester, Stella explains that with her brother in her bed, she has nowhere else to sleep. The Duke watches her, thinking things have taken a strange turn. He recalls the rumors he'd heard that his new wife was a woman who used men to get what she wanted. He'd planned on treating her the same way, but her innocent expression makes him second-guess himself. Assuming she's sad about her family, he decides to comfort her his own way. He grabs her hand, pulling her into an embrace and reminding her that he is, in fact, her husband. Stella is stunned, immediately insisting that's not what she meant by coming to his room. The Duke laughs, admitting he was only joking. Annoyed, she tells him she doesn't appreciate his humor. He agrees to stop teasing and finally invites her inside his room for the night, calling her my dear. Inside his room, Duke Rochester suggests a glass of wine before bed, and Stella happily accepts. She can't get his earlier joke out of her head, blushing as she fans her face. A memory of her maid, Lily, pops into her mind, scolding her for the fact their marriage hasn't been properly finalized. The Duke mentions that the servants are well aware of their private arrangements. He then asks Stella if she has any particular habits when she drinks. She flinches, admitting she's never had that much alcohol before. He smirks, saying it's an honor to be the first to witness it, and they clink their glasses together in a toast. As Stella sips the wine, she reminds herself that their 3-year contract marriage means there's no reason for them to get too close. The wine is delicious, though, and before long, empty bottles are scattered on the floor. A soft hiccup escapes from Stella, signaling the night has taken an unexpected turn. A hiccup escapes Stella as she sways in her seat, declaring it the best beverage she has ever tasted. The Duke calmly informs her that it's alcohol, and she has had enough for the night. Giggling, she tells him she feels like she's floating. When she tries to stand, she stumbles and nearly crashes to the floor. The Duke moves quickly, catching her just in time. He effortlessly scoops her into his arms, warning her to be careful. Delighted by the sudden movement, Stella exclaims that she's flying. He smirks, noting that she becomes a total mess after a few drinks. Suddenly, her playful mood evaporates. Tears stream down her face as she admits it has been a terrible day. Thinking of her family, she feels completely left out, as if she's being pushed out of the picture. The Duke's expression softens. He holds her a little closer and quietly reminds her, "You have me, though." Still in his arms, Stella drops a bombshell. She wants a family. The Duke is taken aback by her sudden declaration. She clarifies that she needs a loving family and, looking him straight in the eye, says she wants to have his child. His jaw tightens and he mutters a curse under his breath, clearly overwhelmed by the emotional weight of her words. He pulls her in closer, and whatever happened next, it was clear their contractual relationship had just become intensely personal. The following morning, Stella wakes up alone in a grand bedroom with a pounding headache. She groggily sits up, embarrassed that she fell asleep in his guest room. Her memory is a total blur. She only recalls drinking wine with him. As she walks through the hall, a vivid flash of the night before hits her the memory of their sudden closeness, leaving her breathless and flustered. She stops dead in her tracks, realizing the night didn't end with just a conversation. A sudden, vivid memory flashes through Stella's mind. A voice echoes in her head, asking if she really thought making a baby would be so easy. Her face burns with embarrassment as she desperately tries to understand what happened. Back in the present, her family is preparing to leave. Her stepmother, relieved after seeing the Duke the day before, asks where he is, as they couldn't find him to say goodbye. Flustered, Stella lies, claiming she hasn't seen him since dinner, but her younger brother immediately calls her out. He explains that he went searching for her late last night and saw Duke Rochester coming out of his room, breathless and completely flushed. The Duke had assured the boy that Stella was fine, admitting they had just been together. Everyone stares. Stella frantically insists it's not what they're thinking, but her mind is a total blank. Mortified and confused, she longs for them to just go away, unable to remember a single thing about the night before. Life at the estate changed for Stella after her family left. The story of her night with Duke Rochester spread quickly through the staff, and suddenly she was being treated with a level of care she wasn't used to. Surrounded by fine desserts and beautiful flowers, she felt more confused than ever. Was this how a duchess was always treated? Or was this special treatment because of what happened between them? Her memory was a complete blank, lost to the wine she'd had that night. As this thought crossed her mind, another more shocking possibility took hold. She clutched her stomach, her face flushing as she realized she could be expecting a child. When a maid noticed her distress, Stella quickly brushed it off, saying she was just full. To avoid an awkward encounter, she sent a message to the Duke, claiming she was unwell and couldn't see him. Upon hearing the news, the Duke was clearly surprised, immediately wondering if she was just hungover from their evening together. Duke Rochester asks a maid about Stella, but the servant can only say that she didn't specify her illness. Realizing it's the first time he hasn't been there to greet her, he heads to her room. He knocks and calls her name, asking if she's all right. A flustered Stella cracks open the door, faking a cough and claiming she has a cold. The Duke notes her raspy voice, but she quickly dismisses his concern and asks to be left alone. For days, Stella actively avoids him. She thinks about their old routine of dinners and walks, but now she can't bring herself to face him. Peeking from behind a pillar, she wonders aloud if he has left for the day. Suddenly, a voice answers from right behind her. The Duke reveals he slept in. He gently takes her arm, startling her. He points out it's been 3 days since they've properly seen each other and asks if she was very sick. Before she can come up with an answer, he smiles and says it's time for a long chat. Duke Rochester confronts Stella, a knowing grin spreading across his face as he asks about the specific ailment she was suffering from. He correctly guesses that she's been avoiding him, feeling something significant had happened between them, but was too embarrassed to ask as she couldn't remember anything. Blushing, Stella apologizes, admitting she only recalls bits and pieces. Amused by her predicament, the Duke declares that he can take care of that for her. He rises from his seat and crosses the room in a few quick strides. Leaning in close, he tells her that if she doesn't remember, he will help her, before she can process his words. He pulls her down onto the sofa with him. He looks down at her and reveals the truth of that night. She had told him she wanted a child. He then clarifies that this confession came before any of the significant things she might be assuming had happened. The Duke then reveals the anticlimactic truth. She simply fell asleep. Stella is instantly mortified. He assures her that he isn't the kind of man who would take advantage of his sleeping wife. Still trying to get her bearings, she asks if he's saying that absolutely nothing happened. With a knowing smile, he confirms her suspicion. He takes her hand and gently asks her to stop avoiding him, admitting it hurts his feelings. For a brief moment, a look of disappointment crosses Stella's face, but it's quickly washed away by a deep blush of embarrassment. She can't believe she let her imagination run so wild. Later that evening, the Duke finds Stella writing on the balcony. He asks why she's still awake. She explains she's writing to her family and how much they all love sending letters. She smiles, recalling sweet memories of her siblings like when her little brother lost a tooth and wrote to the tooth fairy, or when a crying Mary gave her an apology letter. Stella reflects on her own fond memories of writing letters, a small comfort from a simpler time. Trying to lighten the mood, she playfully asks Callian if he also writes letters to Madame Rochester, referring to herself. The question makes him pause. His hand twitches as he reveals a truth he hasn't shared before. While Stella expects an embarrassing childhood story, the mood turns serious. Callian admits that he doesn't have a good relationship with his mother and has no memory of exchanging loving letters with her. Realizing she's accidentally opened an old wound, Stella feels a pang of regret. She sees past his mature exterior to the lonely child he must have been. Determined to offer some comfort, she clutches her chest and makes a heartfelt proposal. Since they are family now, she will write to him to bring them closer. With a hopeful smile, she asks if he will write back, leaving Kalyan speechless and blushing from her unexpected kindness. With a look of genuine gratitude, Kalyan thanks Stella for her kind offer. Flustered, Stella replies that it's nothing, assuring him she wants to do anything in her power to help. Taking a chance, she carefully asks about his relationship with his mother, wondering why they had a falling out. Internally, she worries she's overstepped again. Kalyan simply smiles, telling her not to worry. He decides to share the story, explaining it's well known and not a secret. He recounts how his mother was raised with immense love and protection. Her father, the former emperor, gave her everything she desired, while her older brother, the current Emperor Dirklan, treated her like a precious doll. Because of this sheltered upbringing, she grew up thinking unconditional love was a given. She was a beautiful woman without a shred of darkness in her. Naturally, when she met Kalyan's father, she completely stole his heart. Kalyan continues his story, explaining that the union between his parents was celebrated by everyone as a true blessing. Their wedding was a grand, picturesque affair. However, there was one person who was not pleased by the marriage: his uncle, the current Emperor Dirklan. After the wedding, everything changed. As time passed, his mother's bright smile vanished, replaced by a deep and constant sorrow. The situation worsened when she found out she was pregnant with him. She spent her days in tears, wishing she could go back to the palace and be a pampered princess again. Kalyan bitterly mutters that all she had to do was give birth to a son. The scene shifts to a memory. A young Kalyan greets Emperor Dirklan, who puts on a show of concern. He mentions the stress Kalyan must be under since his father's passing. But the friendly act quickly fades as Dirklan's hand tightens around the boy's collar, his threatening nature breaking through the surface. In the chilling memory, Emperor Dirklan's friendly mask drops. He reveals he knows about young Kalyan's attempts to build influence, taunting him about how his allies keep meeting unfortunate ends. A stunned Kalyan asks how he could possibly know, and his uncle delivers a devastating blow. It was Kalyan's own mother who told him everything. Dirklan's hand tightens on the boy's collar as his voice drops to a low threat. He asks just how many more people need to disappear before Kalyan finally gets out of his sight. The terrified prince can only agree to back down. Back in the present, Kalyan connects the dots for Stella. He explains that the fact he was a son bothered his uncle to no end, leading to constant arguments with his mother. He reveals that two of his biggest life choices, joining the military and even marrying Stella, were strategic moves to make Dirklan see him as less of a threat. After dropping this bombshell, Kalyan stands to leave, wishing her good night. A surprised Stella quickly returns the farewell. After hearing Kalyan's heavy confession, Stella immediately regrets prying into his painful past. A few days pass, but the story continues to weigh on her mind. While sitting at her desk, she lets out a deep sigh, which is overheard by her tutor, Mrs. Pope. Sensing her distress, Mrs. Pope kindly offers to postpone their lesson. Stella quickly insists she's fine, but when asked what's wrong, she admits she can't stop thinking about what Kalyan told her about his mother. Mrs. Pope remarks that their troubled relationship is common knowledge among high society. However, Stella isn't satisfied with just one side of the story. She reveals she was trying to write a letter to Kalyan's mother, hoping to meet her and hear her perspective directly, but she hesitates, worried that Kalyan would disapprove. Mrs. Pope bluntly advises against it, stating that society blames the woman for the family's downfall and that contacting her would be pointless. Confused by Stella's concern, she asks why she cares so much. Stella then turns the tables, asking Mrs. Pope if it's true that she frequently visits Kalyan's mother. Caught off guard, Mrs. Pope's expression softens into a knowing smile. She asks how she could possibly stay uninvolved when Stella is so deeply concerned, changing her stance completely. She offers to get permission from Kalyan and deliver Stella's letter to his mother. A surprised Stella asks if she's sure his mother wouldn't mind, but Mrs. Pope reassures her, confident that Madame Rochester will be thrilled to hear from her. Just a few days later, a reply arrives. The letter is straightforward, inviting Stella to the manor as soon as possible. Stella prepares carefully for the visit, dressing in her finest clothes for the first time in a while and bringing a thoughtful gift basket. As she heads out, Kalyan's mother is seen watching from a window, awaiting her arrival. Elsewhere, Kalyan looks a bit irritated. He reflects that Stella has written letters to her family and even to his own mother. He can't help but wonder when it will finally be his turn to receive a letter from his wife. In a sunlit parlor, Stella sits down for tea with Kalyan's mother, Madame Rochester. The older woman is all business, cutting straight to the point. She sets her teacup down and asks directly why Stella wanted to see her. Instead of answering, Stella presents the gift basket she brought. She lifts the lid, and to Madame Rochester's complete surprise, 3 tiny goslings poke their heads out, letting out soft peeps. The woman flinches, a deep blush coloring her cheeks as she stares at the small birds. Stella explains that since it would be rude to come empty-handed, she asked Callian what his mother liked. He told her that she had always loved animals since she was a child and was especially fond of birds. Stella adds that hearing this simple fact made her realize that perhaps his childhood wasn't entirely awful. The unexpected and deeply personal gift, a fond memory delivered by her son's wife, leaves Madame Rochester visibly moved and at a loss for words. As Madame Rochester carefully cradles one of the goslings, she acknowledges the painful truth. She assumes that if Callian told Stella about her, he must have also mentioned the rumors that painted her as an immature princess unfit for motherhood, a woman who destroyed her son's life and forced him into the military with her own hands, admitting she was too drained to ever refute them. Stella gently asks why she doesn't just try talking to him. The question makes Madame Rochester snap, shouting that she's tried countless times, but her son refuses to even see her. Her sudden outburst startles the little bird, and she immediately softens, apologizing for scaring it. Cutting through the tension, Stella asks a different question. Has she ever tried apologizing? She relays Callian's own words, explaining that he believes everything happened because his mother was simply naive. He felt his birth had drained away all her happiness. As his mother glares, Stella clarifies that he didn't sound resentful. In fact, he looked incredibly sad. Stella looks at Callian's mother with gentle understanding. She advises that even between parents and children, apologies should be given where they are due. The suggestion hits a nerve, and Madame Rochester looks away, her confidence faltering. She quietly asks what she's supposed to do if Callian doesn't accept her apology, insisting that the whole affair is much more complicated than Stella realizes. Her mind flashes back to the day he left. A younger, more frantic version of herself had rushed down the grand staircase, calling his name. She grabbed her son's arm, demanding to know why he was suddenly joining the military. She pleaded with him, asking what would become of their family, their home, and her. Callian's expression was calm but resolute. He told his mother that he was leaving precisely to protect their family and her. He then pulled his arm from her grasp and walked away, leaving her to watch as he disappeared down the long hall. Madame Rochester's trip down memory lane continues with the painful fallout from that day. She admits she directed all her fury at Callian as he left. Soon after, terrifying rumors began to circulate. People connected to his business ventures kept meeting unfortunate ends. While the official story blamed a mole leaking confidential information, the truth hit her hard as she felt the weight of everyone's suspicious stares. A chilling realization washed over her. Every worried word she had confided in her brother, the Emperor, had likely been used to sabotage her own son. She trembles, finally understanding that Callian had left to protect her from this situation. She insists a simple apology could never heal the deep wounds she caused. Stella, however, calmly disagrees, telling her that forgiveness is Callian's decision to make, not hers. Taking the Duchess's hand, Stella promises to help, asserting that family can't just give up. She then reveals a critical piece of information. Callian told her he has never received a single letter from his mother. With a warm smile, Stella suggests that Madame Rochester should simply start by writing a letter, confident that Callian is waiting to hear from her. The Duchess's spirits seem to lift at the thought. Filled with a renewed sense of hope, she thanks Stella and suggests they name the goslings first. But elsewhere, a different conversation is taking place. A woman in a brilliant red gown asks a subordinate if he's found anything out about Stella. The man reports that according to the rumors, Callian and Stella are incredibly close and seem very happy together. This news immediately enrages the woman. She shoots up from her seat, insisting that Callian is in love with her. How could he possibly be happy with another woman? Convinced that Stella must be exploiting some weakness, she concludes that she needs to save Callian from her clutches. With chilling intensity, she orders her subordinate to conduct a proper investigation and find out everything there is to know about Stella Ambrose. A maid approaches Callian's desk and presents him with a letter from his mother, Madame Rochester. A slight smile touches his lips as he realizes Stella must have succeeded in her efforts to mend their relationship. Taking the letter, he wonders aloud why his wife insists on doing things he never asks of her. He picks up his quill, referring to Stella as a little troublemaker, but the maid notices a different story on his face. Though his words are a light complaint, he seems genuinely happy. Later, Callian sits down with Stella and hands her an elegant envelope. He informs her it's an invitation to a party hosted by Viscount Merkeler. Stella is flustered, pointing out that she's never even had a proper debut and doesn't know the host. Callian smoothly explains that while she may be past the usual age for a debut, this party will serve as the perfect occasion to officially introduce her to high society. Callian continues to explain the social strategy behind the invitation. The hosts, The Merkelers are new to the capital and need this first party to be a success. To boost their influence, they need high-ranking nobles to attend, and Callian, having just married after leaving the military, is their ideal guest. However, the Merkelers knew he might refuse, so they cleverly sent the invitation directly to Stella, thinking she would be more likely to accept. It's a savvy move. Even if Callian doesn't attend, the hosts still get the credit for arranging the new Duchess's official debut into high society. Hearing this, Lily stifles a laugh. The gossip is Truth Duke has never made a public appearance with his wife. The realization hits Stella hard. She clutches the envelope, thinking she had always assumed he was embarrassed to be seen with her. Seeing her hesitation, Callian offers to decline the invitation for her, but Stella quickly interrupts him, firmly stating that she will go. Stella's determined expression softens as she admits she's a little scared to go to the party all by herself. Callian is momentarily confused, but then a playful smirk appears as he realizes what she's really worried about. He chuckles, asking her what he should do about it. Extending a hand, he tells her to properly ask him to go with her, adding that she knows he won't be able to refuse, calling him a tease. Stella stands up and closes the distance between them. She places her hands on his chest and asks if he'll come with her so she won't be alone. Of course, he replies smoothly, questioning who else she would possibly go with. His hand gently moves to her hair as he pulls her closer, whispering that he's a very jealous man. Stella teases him right back, wondering how a man can be jealous of himself. He just laughs, concedes the point, and brings her in for a soft kiss. At the lavish Merkeler estate, the party is in full swing. The hosts are thrilled to see Callian and Stella arrive, rushing to greet them. Playing the part of a devoted husband, Callian smoothly explains his rare public appearance. He tells them that since it was his wife's first invitation, he couldn't possibly decline. He turns to Stella, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. Stella, looking radiant, plays her part perfectly. With a charming smile, she confirms his story, playfully adding that she practically had to beg him to attend. They thank the hosts and move into the hall, a perfect picture of a happy couple. Their pleasant walk is soon interrupted when a man calls out Callian's name. Egbert approaches with a friendly smile, saying he didn't expect to see the Duke here. He admits he only came because he heard Callian would be there. Clearly, word of the couple's arrival has already spread throughout the capital. With a smug grin, Egbert notes that he heard Callian was bringing the wife he'd been hiding, adding that everyone is curious. His stare makes Stella deeply uncomfortable. Suddenly, a loud crash echoes through the hall as a maid trips, shattering a glass on the floor. While another woman scolds the poor girl, the scene gives Egbert an idea. He recalls a time at a social club, telling Stella that her husband has a warm heart beneath his cold exterior. Egbert recounts how Callian once threw gold coins at a clumsy worker as a supposed act of charity. The memory hits Stella like a physical blow. Her heart pounds as she realizes he's talking about her back when she was forced to work as a footman. The shock causes her to stagger, and Callian immediately grabs her to keep her steady. He shoots a furious glare at Egbert, leaning in close. In a low, menacing tone, Callian asks if he's always been this chatty. Still reeling from Egbert's story, Stella quietly asks Callian to excuse her for a moment. Maintaining his public persona, Callian warmly tells his dear wife to take all the time she needs. Once she's gone, Egbert turns to Callian with a smug look, asking what's going on. He then reminds Callian of something he once said, that a woman like Stella Ambrose was not worthy to be by his side. Egbert chuckles, noting how Callian has now become such a doting husband. The facade immediately drops. Callian's gaze turns ice cold. He takes a deliberate step toward Egbert, invading his space. Ignoring the jab completely, he leans in and asks in a low, dangerous tone if Egbert has always been this chatty. The threat is crystal clear. A nervous Egbert backpedals fast, claiming he was just joking around. He now believes the rumors are true. The ruthless Callian is genuinely in love. But Callian says nothing, his cold silence more intimidating than any words. As Egbert stews in his fear, a noblewoman approaches Callian, asking for a private meeting to discuss business. But Callian's focus is elsewhere. He calmly states that he should go to his wife, admitting he's not comfortable leaving her alone for long. With that, he turns and walks away, leaving the woman and other guests completely stunned by his abrupt departure. Meanwhile, Stella hurries down a long corridor, trying to catch her breath. Egbert's story brought back a flood of painful memories. She remembers all the filthy rumors high society spread about her, that she was an object to be passed around, a beautiful woman who could be sold for a small fortune. Leaning against a door, she tries to calm her racing heart. Just then, two ladies block her path with cruel smirks. They mockingly greet Duchess Rochester, calling her the infamous woman from the rumors. Stella doesn't recognize them, and they sneer that she left society so long ago. One whispers to the other that Stella simply doesn't remember them because they aren't men. The ladies continue their mockery, laughing about how Duke Rochester could possibly end up with someone like Stella. Their open contempt crushes her. Just like the disdain she has endured for years, she feels trapped by the invisible shackles of rumors that have followed her since before her marriage, knowing she can't break free on her own. However, a new resolve takes hold. She believes the Duke might help her, since the stories are too ridiculous to be true. But first, she has to handle this. The women snicker that she shouldn't be offended, considering she married up. Though confrontation scares her, Stella decides to act the part of a duchess who defends her honor. Composing herself, she looks at them and says they are being incredibly rude. She then coolly asks for their family names so she can lodge a formal complaint. Remembering a time when she was tossed aside like a coin, she refuses to let her value be decided by others ever again. Just as the confrontation heats up, a calm voice cuts in from behind Stella. It's Callian, and he'd also like to know what has his wife so upset. He places a hand on her, his expression unreadable, as he demands an explanation from the two stunned ladies of House Brown and House Adelia. They stammer that it's all a misunderstanding, but another woman in a bold red dress glides between them. She smoothly defends her friends, asking Callian to be more understanding. She then chides him for following her, adding that it's not a good look for a married man. After sending her friends away, she turns to Stella and offers an apology on Callian's behalf. Stella, completely taken aback, asks who she is to apologize for her husband. With a flawless curtsy, she introduces herself as Janet Weymouth. The name clearly shocks Stella, who recognizes it immediately. Stella recognizes the name instantly. Janet Weymouth is Callian's former fiancé. She grabs his arm, her voice low. She reminds him that he told her not to worry about Janet, so his actions have left her deeply hurt. Callian quickly denies it, insisting he followed Stella because he didn't want her to be by herself. When Stella playfully says she's starting to resent him, he pleads with her not to, as the thought breaks his heart. Watching their close interaction, Janet's smile becomes strained. She excuses herself to give them some privacy, but her polite facade crumbles the moment she turns away. She sees Stella as a cunning woman who has sunk her claws into a naive Callian. Janet becomes determined to free him from what she believes is a carefully laid trap. After Janet leaves, Stella begins to tremble. The emotional weight of the evening crashes down on her. Noticing her distress, Callian gently asks if she's crying. With tears welling in her eyes, Stella admits she isn't crying, just devastated that her debut has been ruined. With tears welling in her eyes, Stella admits that her debut is completely ruined. Callian calmly reassures her that it isn't, reminding her they only just arrived. Feeling insecure after the encounter with Janet, Stella confesses that she doesn't know how to play the part of a loved wife and can't even perform a perfect curtsy like her. In response, Callian offers his hand with a reassuring smile. He promises to help her have the most stunning debut of the evening. Stella, still upset, tells him not to mind her grumpiness. He gently takes her hand anyway, telling her he finds her pouting rather charming, which leaves her completely flustered. Without another word, he confidently leads her onto the dance floor. As they begin to twirl to the music, it's clear Callian is determined to turn her disastrous evening into a memorable one for all the right reasons. As they gracefully move across the dance floor, Callian asks Stella if she's feeling better. She quickly reassures him her upset was brief, but thanks him for his concern. Noticing they've captured the room's attention, Callian tells her to look around at the whispering guests. A confident smile plays on his lips as he leans in, asking if she wants to make them all jealous of her. Confused, Stella asks how. He whispers his simple plan. She just needs to give him a big smile and laugh, so everyone will wonder what they're talking about. He wants her to look like the happiest woman in the world. When she admits she can't laugh on command, Callian has a playful solution. He lightly tickles her side, coaxing a genuine happy laugh out of her. The intimate moment doesn't go unnoticed. Across the ballroom, a furious Janet watches them, her face a mask of cold anger. Later that evening, Stella finds Callian in his study. After a gentle knock, she peeks in and asks if he has a moment. He greets her with a warm smile, explaining he was just about to come looking for her as he invites her in. Once they are seated, he asks if she's exhausted from the banquet. Blushing slightly, Stella tells him she's fine because he took such good care of her, but the pleasantries quickly fade as she gets to the real reason for her visit. She explains there's a rumor about her made very clear at tonight's ball. Hesitantly, she confesses it's about her having inappropriate relationships, but she doesn't know the specifics. She asks if he would be willing to investigate it. Callian's expression shifts. He makes a startling admission. He already knew about the rumors, but kept them from her to protect her from the shock. Callian finally reveals the source of the rumors. Another woman, Julia Ambrose, has been engaging in inappropriate behavior around the city while using Stella's name. Stella is completely stunned by the news. He reassures her that he's already taken care of it, explaining that Julia has been sent to a convent and will never be seen in the capital again. He even offers to make her punishment more severe. But Stella feels a pit in her stomach. She wonders why he kept this from her and let her reputation suffer. She realizes his kindness at the ball was just for show. He knew the rumors were hurting her but didn't think they were important enough to stop, hoping for a real answer. She asks if this means the rumors will finally end. Callian simply tells her that as long as she stays by his side, no one will trouble her. The devastating reality sets in. He isn't going to do anything more. Stella clutches her dress, remembering she was sold for her family's sake, and was a fool to ever think he was truly on her side. With a look of quiet resolve, Stella informs Callian that she should probably avoid parties from now on. She admits she's still struggling to process the fact that Julia started the rumors. Stating that she needs some time to think, she rises from her seat to leave. Callian calls out her name, but she simply asks to be excused and walks out, the door closing firmly behind her. Left alone in the quiet study, Callian lets out a heavy sigh. He feels helpless, knowing he can't tell her the whole truth, that her cousin Julia had made inappropriate advances toward him. The image of Stella's heartbroken face is too much to bear. He suddenly springs to his feet, determined not to let their conversation end this way. A strange fear grips him as his heart pounds in his chest, experiencing the anxiety of his first real argument. Meanwhile, Stella has already retreated to her room, where she's curled up on the bed, quietly crying. As Callian paces his study, he decides he needs to go and console his wife after their fight. But just as he resolves to go to her, he stops. An urgent message has arrived, pulling his attention away from his personal turmoil. The note is a series of code words. Eagle, eye, lake, boat ride, guest. He quickly deciphers the hidden meaning. Eagle is their symbol for the emperor, meaning Eye of the Eagle is a direct warning. Watch out for the king's spies. The message instructs him to host a boat party on the lake at his estate, a seemingly innocent event to avert suspicion while meeting with allies. But the warning about a spy lingers in his mind. Who could be watching him so closely? The most obvious answer is Stella, the woman his uncle personally chose for him. A dark suspicion coils around his heart. Yet, even as he questions her, he can't shake the image of her face. The more he suspects Stella, the more he desperately wants to believe in the innocence he sees in her crystal-clear eyes. While Stella retreats to her room, crying quietly on her bed, Callian is left alone in his study. He feels a growing helplessness and decides he needs to console his wife after their first real fight. Just as he's about to leave, he stops dead in his tracks. An urgent coded message has just arrived. He quickly deciphers the note. Eagle, eye, lake, boat ride, guest. He grasps its meaning instantly. Eye of the Eagle is a dire warning to watch out for the Emperor's spies. The message instructs him to host a boat party as a clever front to secretly meet with his allies. His thoughts turn to the most obvious suspect. Who could be the spy? It has to be Stella, the very woman his uncle handpicked for him. A grim suspicion takes hold. His logical mind tells him to be cautious of her, but his heart rebels. The more he thinks about it, the more he desperately wants to believe in the innocence he sees in her eyes. Still reeling from the coded message, Callian is interrupted by Stella, who demands to know the truth behind the rumors circulating about them. She tells him he can't just expect her to accept his version of events, calling him irresponsible. Unmoved, Callian coldly replies that talking about it won't change anything, and that she should simply forget his cousin. Shocked by his dismissive attitude, Stella pushes back. Callian retorts sarcastically, asking if she expects him to beg her to attend parties and obey her every command. Realizing the futility of their argument, Stella's demeanor shifts. She stands tall and announces her new approach to their arrangement. If they are to get along, she needs to know her place. From now on, she will follow his instructions without question. However, she requests that he communicates any orders through an intermediary. With that, she calmly asks him to leave. Callian is left utterly speechless, stunned by her sudden and icy resolve. With his back turned, Callian's voice is cold and formal. He agrees to her request, stating he will send the schedule through an intermediary. He offers a clipped good night, and the heavy door clicks shut, leaving Stella standing alone in the vast hall. The finality of the sound is too much for her to bear. Tears well up in her eyes and stream down her face as she thinks about his sudden, harsh cruelty. 1 week later, the sun shines on a lavish lakeside party. It's the perfect cover for Callian's secret meeting. He and Stella arrive together, keeping up appearances despite the distance between them. A guest, revealed to be a prince, greets Callian warmly before turning to Stella with a smile. He declares it's a pleasure to finally meet Duchess Rochester. The name is a shock, but Stella quickly recovers. With a graceful curtsy, she calmly replies that it is an honor to meet His Highness. The prince with the warm smile tells Stella the honor is all his. He then apologizes for the interruption, but asks if he can borrow Callian for a moment, explaining that they have an urgent matter to discuss. To Stella, this is a welcome distraction. While she would normally want to stay close to Callian, right now she prefers to be alone. She politely gives her permission, and the two men walk away to talk privately. From a distance, a woman in a striking red dress watches the exchange with a smug look. She scoffs, convinced that the couple's passionate act is already failing. Believing their bond is shallow and that they're growing tired of each other, she sees her opportunity. Turning to someone nearby, she quietly declares her plan to destroy their relationship for good. Stella overhears the vicious remark and turns startled. The woman faces her with a confident smile and formally introduces herself. She is Janet Weymouth, the Crown Prince's fiancée, leaving Stella completely stunned. Stella flinches, the introduction hitting her like a physical blow. Her mind reels with confusion. She was certain that Janet Weymouth was Duke Rochester's former fiancée. So how did she suddenly become engaged to the Crown Prince? With a predatory smile, Janet asks if Stella is uncomfortable. Stella's gaze darts toward Callian in the distance, who gives a subtle but firm shake of his head, a silent warning to tread carefully. Deciding to retreat, Stella politely claims it's an honor to meet her but says she feels unwell and wishes to be alone. Janet's friendly mask immediately drops. She scoffs, telling Stella that she is the one who needs to understand her place. With chilling confidence, Janet promises to prove that Stella is nothing more than a disposable object. Faced with such blatant hostility, Stella can only quietly acknowledge her words. Later, she sits by herself at a secluded table, bored and isolated, her thoughts drifting to the Duke. After the unsettling confrontation with Janet, Stella finds a secluded table for herself. Bored and isolated, she wishes she'd brought a book. Her quiet time is cut short when she notices a man with reddish hair watching her from a distance. He soon approaches, politely addressing her as Duchess Rochester and asking if she's feeling better. He explains that Lady Janet has been telling everyone she was unwell, which has made the other guests worried. It's clear Janet is already trying to manipulate the situation. The man apologizes for the intrusion but felt he should greet her personally. He introduces himself as Captain Eisen Lawrence and mentions that he served in the same military unit as Callian. Stella politely thanks him and suggests he join the others, but he isn't going anywhere. He insists he can't leave her all alone and pulls up a chair, saying their conversation is just beginning. When she claims she would only bore him, he just smiles, calling the idea complete nonsense. Still uncomfortable with the attention, Stella tries to politely push Captain Lawrence away, admitting she isn't used to the workings of high society. Eisen simply smiles, reassuring her that they can just have a casual chat to pass the time. He tells her to relax, but she insists he'd find better company elsewhere. As an excuse, she admits she's sitting alone because she can't even take a boat ride by herself. This detail catches Eisen's attention. He asks if she's really never been on a boat before. Before she can answer, he stands up and gives a formal bow. With a charming grin, he offers to personally row the boat for her. Stella is completely caught off guard by his sudden kindness, a faint blush appearing on her face. Meanwhile, the political games continue. A key player reveals he's been digging into his father's illegitimate child, and the trail leads to Count Briarton. Briarton is a notorious cheapskate known for exploiting the poor, yet he's been making large donations to an orphanage. It's there he conveniently adopted a child, and the implication is clear. The investigation reaches a shocking conclusion. The orphan is none other than the Emperor's illegitimate child. Callian is shaken by the news, realizing his father intends to bring this new heir into high society and replace him. His advisor, a cold and pragmatic man, explains that a peaceful succession is no longer an option. To make his point, he casually crushes a small bug under his finger, declaring that pests must be eliminated. He pressures Callian, suggesting they stage an accident to remove the boy from the picture. This is his chance to secure the throne, but Callian firmly rejects the idea. He insists the child is innocent and his own younger brother. To him, protecting the weak is an imperial duty. The advisor privately thinks Callian is a fool but puts on a supportive smile, promising to find another way. The scene then shifts to the lake, where Eisen carefully rows a boat for a flustered Stella, telling her to watch her step. Captain Lawrence holds out his hand, inviting Stella to join him. She hesitates, admitting she's not sure this was a good idea, especially as she notices other nobles whispering about her again. She remembers Callian's assurance that the rumors would stop if she just stayed by his side. Stealing her nerves, she decides to go to him later, and, for now, accepts the captain's kind offer. She thanks him and reaches for his hand. However, as she steps onto the boat, it wobbles violently, and she loses her balance. With a small cry, she stumbles forward. Lawrence moves quickly, catching her in a secure embrace before she can fall. He asks if she's alright, a blush creeping onto his face. Stella apologizes for being clumsy, explaining it's her first time. Soon, the pair are out on the water, sharing a laugh. But their pleasant moment is being watched. From the shore, Duke Rochester observes them with an icy glare, his thoughts turning possessive. He coldly wonders what Captain Lawrence is doing with his wife. From the shore, Duke Rochester's good mood soured as he watched the boat. He turned to his aide, Alex, and demanded to know why his wife was out on the water with Colonel Lawrence. Alex was just as confused, explaining he thought Stella was resting alone. Suddenly, a woman named Jeanette approached them, claiming she saw the whole thing happen. With a sly smile, she explained that the colonel approached Stella first. According to Jeanette, Stella Ho had just been claiming she felt unwell, perked up, and hopped on the boat, much to the disappointment of other young ladies. Jeanette then pointed out how intimate they looked, adding that she'd never seen Stella smile so genuinely. Seeing their fun, the Duke declared he couldn't lose to them. Jeanette excitedly suggested they go boating too, but Alex quickly bowed out, claiming a stomachache. While Duke Rochester fumed on the shore, his aide Alex suddenly feigned a stomachache, leaving Callian to take a delighted Jeanette boating instead. The Duke's possessive thoughts were clear. He couldn't leave his fiancée alone with another man. Unseen by the others, Callian shared a similar sentiment, quietly accepting the boat ride because he refused to leave his wife unattended. Out on the lake, Jeanette tried to charm Callian, reminiscing about their childhood, but he bluntly informed her she was only there as a favor to his aide. When he dismissed her attempts to talk about their feelings, Jeanette opted for a more dramatic tactic. Declaring that love required recklessness, she risked her life to make him see the truth. With that, she purposefully tipped herself over the side of the boat, plunging into the water with a huge splash. Her desperate gamble had begun. As Jeanette sinks beneath the surface, her ambition surfaces in a vivid thought. If Callian were to weigh her against the Duchess, she was certain she would come out on top. Above the water, Callian is completely unimpressed by her desperate act. He internally remarks that her father must have a hard time with a daughter who is so utterly insane. His thoughts are cut short when Colonel Lawrence waves from a nearby boat, surprised to see him. Stella, who is with Lawrence, is equally shocked, wondering if Callian left her just to go boating with another woman. As their boats drift closer, the two men exchange polite greetings. Meanwhile, Stella and Callian lock eyes, and a palpable tension hangs between them. Once Jeanette is safely out of the water, she immediately confronts Stella. She sarcastically questions why Stella, who claimed to be sick, was suddenly well enough for a boat ride with the colonel. Stella calmly explains she felt better after a rest, offering a cool apology. Jeanette puts on a sweet smile, claiming there's no reason for Stella to be offended because they are practically sisters. Stella is completely baffled by the bizarre comment. Noticing the confusion, Jeanette leans in closer, her voice dropping to a sinister whisper. She reminds Stella that they have both been held by the same man. Flustered, Stella can't even form a response. Jeanette continues her twisted game, proposing a hypothetical test. She wonders aloud that if they both fell into the water, who would Callian choose to save? It was a direct challenge to see who he truly loves more. Before Stella can react, Jeanette gives her a violent shove. With a huge splash, Stella is sent tumbling into the lake. From the other boat, Lawrence and Callian shout her name in pure shock. As they both sink beneath the dark water, Jeanette thinks to herself that this is the perfect way to test Callian's love. The scene ends with Stella gasping and coughing, struggling to stay afloat. Stella's vision blurs as she regains consciousness, coughing up water. She finds herself securely in Colonel Lawrence's arms as he urgently calls for more blankets. Still dazed, she tries to recall what happened, remembering only Jeanette's strange challenge before she was pushed into the lake. Clutching the colonel's arm, she weakly asks where Duke Callian is. Before Lawrence can form a reply, a shout from the shore answers her question. Someone yells that the Duke saved Lady Weymers and they need a stretcher for her. The words hit Stella with the force of a physical blow. Her mind flashes to an image of Callian carrying Jeanette, leaving her behind. She hadn't thought they were deeply in love, but she truly believed they had formed an unspoken connection. Now, that illusion was shattered. As her body shivered from the cold and a rising fever, Stella felt the unbearable sound of her own one-sided love finally ending. Without warning, Jeanette gave Stella a violent shove, sending her tumbling backward into the lake. The sudden splash broke the calm afternoon. On a nearby boat, Callian and Lawrence shouted Stella's name, their faces etched with pure shock. Lawrence immediately said they needed to get help. but Callian was already moving. He didn't hesitate, diving straight into the cold water after her. Beneath the surface, as they both sank into the deep blue, Callian's mind focused on one thing. Seeing Stella's pale face, he knew he had to save her, or he would die right there with her. It was in that silent underwater world that he realized he could never live without her. Meanwhile, Lawrence, who had also jumped in, couldn't see them in the murky depths. Realizing he was out of his league, he decided the only option was to swim back and call for reinforcements. Callian breaks the surface, gasping for air while holding an unconscious Stella tightly. He desperately asks Lawrence if he's found Lady Jeanette. Lawrence can only shake his head, confirming he found Callian's wife but not the other woman. Lawrence thinks they need backup, but Callian knows it will be too late. Watching from a distance, Emperor Dirklin's mind races. He realizes his entire plan is on the verge of collapse. If Stella survives and his key pawn, Jeanette, doesn't, his scheme to trigger a rebellion will be ruined. Back in the lake, Callian makes a critical decision. He hands Stella over to Lawrence, ordering him to get her to safety and gather more help. With his wife secure, Callian dives back into the murky water. Moments later, he emerges carrying Jeanette and rushes to the shore. Emperor Dirklin confronts him immediately. Callian explains she'll be fine after a doctor sees her, but the Emperor is enraged. He grabs Callian by the collar, accusing him of being a fool for how things played out. Emperor Dirklin is furious, accusing Callian of only being calm because he managed to rescue Stella first. He demands to know why Jeanette wasn't the priority, but Callian remains composed. He quietly reminds the Emperor that they have an audience and should lower their voices. He insists the focus should be on getting Jeanette to a doctor, not arguing about who did what. Realizing his outburst was a mistake, the Emperor backs down. He tells Callian to go check on Stella, noting she doesn't look well either. This gives Callian the opening he needs. With a cold glare, he firmly corrects his uncle. She is not Ambrose. She is his wife, the Duchess Rochester. Later, a frantic Duke Rochester bursts into the mansion, calling for Stella. The head maid informs him that the doctor has just left. Stella is still unconscious and at risk for pneumonia after taking in so much water. Standing by her bedside, Rochester is overwhelmed with regret. He begs her to wake up, saying their recent fight means nothing. He just wants a chance to apologize. As Duke Rochester kept a close watch over the unconscious Stella, her mind wandered into a hazy dream. She pictured herself restrained, a heavy chain around her neck. Suddenly, Callian appeared before her, sword in hand. He declared that if she were ever trapped in a situation she didn't want, he would be the one to set her free. His promise grew more intense, admitting that even if she were a spy sent to eliminate him, he wouldn't mind at all. It would just be an excuse to keep her with him. Back in the waking world, Rochester gently took Stella's hand. His thoughts turned to his suspicions about the incident. He'd already instructed an associate to investigate the connection between Stella and the Emperor, determined to find out why she became a puppet in his uncle's scheme. But with no news, he decided he had waited long enough. He stood, telling the head maid to look after his wife. It was time he stepped in personally. While Stella recovers in bed, the head maid brings her a meal, gently insisting she eat. She mentions that Duke Rochester would be upset to see her like this, but Stella silently disagrees. She believes that if Rochester truly cared, he wouldn't have been gone for so long. After all, their marriage is just a contract, and his actions during the incident proved he still prioritizes his former fiancée. Her bitter thoughts are interrupted by a knock. A servant enters to announce an unexpected guest, Lady Janet Weymouth. He explains that he's already shown her to the drawing room, but can send her away if Stella isn't feeling up to it. Meanwhile, Lady Janet waits, a single blue rose in her hand. She calmly crushes the delicate flower, its petals scattering. Looking directly at Stella, she asks what she would like to do, making it clear this is not a friendly visit. Stella's heart pounds, caught completely off guard by the confrontation. Lady Janet Weymouth sits opposite Stella, offering a hollow apology for not visiting sooner. With a smug smile, she remarks that the rumors about Stella's poor health weren't an exaggeration, noting her face is a mess. Stella flashes back to a previous encounter where Janet mockingly called them sisters, having both been with the same man. Stella asks if that's all Janet came to say. Janet dismisses her, claiming Stella's own recklessness caused her to fall ill. She then changes her tone, feigning innocence and claiming she's there to express her gratitude. Confused, Stella wonders what she could possibly be grateful for. Janet reveals that Duke Rochester has been visiting her every single day, bringing flowers and gifts. She feels honored he takes so much time to see her. The news hits Stella hard. She hasn't seen Rochester once since the incident. Janet stands and approaches, thanking Stella in person. After all, if the Duke is showing this much concern for a former lover, what does that mean for his current fiancée? With a smug look, Janet suggests that for Rochester to visit her so often, He must have a very understanding wife. She then twists the knife, thanking Stella for sharing her husband. The cruel words land like a physical blow, and Stella struggles to breathe. In that moment, a horrible thought clicks into place. She was only ever a replacement for Janet. As Janet gets up and leaves with a dismissive sound, Stella's coughing fit intensifies. Outside, Janet puts on a performance, loudly calling for a doctor to help the Duchess. Alone and gasping for air, Stella realizes the devastating truth. Rochester knew she was completely powerless to fight back against this humiliation. A violent cough brings a trace of blood to her lips. She finally accepts that this was her role all along, and his kindness had been a lie. The crushing weight of it all is too much. Her vision fades, and she slumps unconscious into her chair. A servant approaches Duke Rochester with terrible news. After a visit from Lady Janet, Stella suffered a severe coughing fit and lost consciousness. We see Stella lying in bed, pale and unresponsive, the aftermath of the encounter clear on her face. A silent rage builds in Rochester. He clenches his jaw, furious that Janet dared to bother his wife again. He was certain he had already made his warning to her perfectly clear. The scene shifts to the Weymouth estate, where Rochester confronts Janet directly. He asks if her plan is to make Stella apologize publicly. With a smug smile, Janet confirms it. She reminds him that the Crown Prince's former fiancé was hurt at his event, and such a scandal can't be easily ignored. She claims she's giving him a quiet way out. Rochester states plainly that Janet was the one who pulled Stella into the water. Unfazed, Janet leans back and scoffs. She asks him who could possibly prove that. Openly challenging his ability to defend his wife's honor, Rochester lets out a single harsh laugh at Janet's challenge. He tells her to listen very carefully, revealing he's already investigated her actions on the day of the incident. He has proof she removed her underdress beforehand so it wouldn't weigh her down. He also knows she had a servant get her a small breathing device at the last minute. The equipment, later found floating on the surface, has been secured as evidence. He dares her to fight a losing battle, declaring he will not back down. Tapping his finger on the table, he stands up. Janet accuses him of lying, claiming he won't reveal the truth because he still loves her. Rochester coldly refutes her claim. He explains he was only holding on to the secret to use as leverage. Stepping toward her, he leans in and makes his position perfectly clear. The only thing he loves is his family. Stella is his wife, and that makes her his. He delivers a final, chilling command for Janet to keep her hands off of Stella from now on. Back in the present, Rochester clenches his fists, furious she ignored his warning. A royal guard announces Callion's arrival, and the massive doors swing open. Inside, Emperor Dirklin greets his nephew, the tension between them obvious. The meeting is a calculated move in a dangerous game. Later that day, back at the Rochester estate, Callion's immediate concern is for Stella. He asks an attendant about his wife's condition. The news isn't good. The doctor confirmed her health has declined, warning that stress is making things much worse. Callion lets out a heavy sigh. His internal thoughts reveal the true purpose of his visit to the palace. He was sizing up his uncle. He needed to know if Dirklin was aware that his marriage to Stella was only a contract. Fortunately, the Emperor seemed completely in the dark. This new information solidifies Callion's resolve. It doesn't matter if Stella is a spy anymore. He knows he must learn everything to protect her from now on. Worried about causing her more stress, he decides to simply watch over her quietly while she sleeps. A maid enters Stella's room, gently reminding her that she can't skip another meal. The doctor was very clear. Lying in bed, she turns away, apologizing that she has no appetite. She promises to eat tomorrow, asking to be left alone. The truth is, she feels too sick to even consider food. Her mind is tormented by Janet's cruel words about sharing her husband. She trembles, wondering if Rochester is with Janet at this very moment. Her spiraling thoughts are interrupted when the maid presents a letter from House Ambrose. Surprised, Stella begins to read. Her mother writes that the family is finally happy and healthy, all thanks to her and Duke Rochester's generosity. The words feel like a heavy weight. Unable to continue, she flattens the letter. She wonders how her mother could call them a perfect family when their comfort was bought with her freedom. She was nothing more than a price they paid. Staring at a portrait of her smiling family, Stella feels the full weight of her sacrifice. She tells herself there's no reason to be disappointed. Her parents just don't know the truth, and if her endurance is the price for their happiness, she'll pay it. Resolved, she calls a maid and asks for paper to write a letter to Duke Rochester. The maid beams, thrilled at the gesture, and quickly rushes to get what she needs. Later, in his office, Rochester is presented with that very letter. The maid explains that Her Grace wrote it for him herself. He's visibly moved, his heart thumping as he recalls a tender moment between them. Stella had made him promise to write back, softly calling him by his first name, Callion. He eagerly opens the envelope, a hopeful look on his face. But the letter doesn't start with his name. It begins with a cold, formal address. Dear Duke Rochester. His hope instantly vanished as he continued reading. The letter was a formal thank you for his kindness, acknowledging how his support allowed her family to live comfortably. In gratitude, she promised to dutifully fulfill her side of their contract. But the next lines were a shock. Stella wrote that she would not object to him seeing other women outside of their marriage. She only asked to be excused from greeting him in the mornings or late at night. His hands trembled as he read the cold sign-off. Sincerely, Stella Ambrose. He shot up from his desk, demanding to know what this letter was. Snatching it, he asked a maid if Stella was in her room, needing to speak with her immediately. As he strode down the hall, he reeled in disbelief. How could she possibly tell him to see another woman? When he reached her door, he saw Stella inside, smiling as she read a different letter. His face hardened. He stopped a maid and asked what mail his wife had received. The answer was simple: well wishes from other noblewomen, one from her family, and one from a Captain Lawrence. Stumped by Stella's cold letter, Duke Rochester learns from a maid she'd received mail from Captain Lawrence. The maid adds Stella had been laughing at a joke from his letter right before writing the formal one to him. Rochester admits it's been a long time since he'd seen his wife genuinely laugh. Seeing her smiling for once, he decides not to disturb her and walks away, a dark look on his face. A few days later, a doctor checks on Stella, warning her that rest is critical. He stresses her health is fragile and further complications could be dangerous. Just then, a maid arrives with another letter from Captain Lawrence. Stella's face lights up with excitement. The maid observes she seems quite close to the captain. Stella agrees, explaining he's a funny person. She recounts telling him about her fear of water, and he replied with a silly joke that made her burst out laughing. Reading another letter from Captain Lawrence, Stella burst out laughing at his silly jokes. His latest note invited her to a bird hunting event, a social gathering she knew nothing about. Just as she inquired with her maid, Duke Rochester's voice cut through the air. He had appeared in the doorway, remarking that it seemed the captain had beaten him to the punch. He dismissed the staff, stating he needed to speak with his wife privately. The door clicked shut, leaving them alone in the vast room. Rochester's tone was cold as he asked how she was feeling. Visibly flustered, Stella reminded him of their agreement to communicate through servants. His patience snapped. He clenched his fist, accusing her of being the one to violate their contract. Stella was stunned. He explained that she was failing to fulfill her duties as the Duchess. Her heart pounded in her chest. She was just a replacement. What more could he possibly want from her?